Natasha and Steph, our new climate change grad interims. Welcome to you to your first cabinet. Hopefully it'll be something of interest to you. Okay, now going just to take the sediment, Christine.
Thanks, Chair. So I have Councillor Douglas Reid.
Yep.
Councillor Jim McMahon.
Yep.
Councillor John McFadden.
Here.
Councillor Elaine Cowan.
Here.
Councillor Maureen Mackay.
Present.
Councillor Ian Linton.
Here.
Councillor Graham Barton.
Yep.
Councillor Barry Douglas.
Here.
Councillor Neil Ingram.
Yep.
Councillor Claire Maitland. No, not yet. Councillor Drew Filson.
Yeah.
And we have Harriet Johnson.
Here.
Babs Mowat.
Here.
I have an apology from Alan Vint. Do we have Norman Watt?
Here, thanks.
And Jackie Livingston.
Here.
Can I just double check, Councillor Maitland, are you on the call?
Christine, I think Councillor Maitland's got family issues that she's dealing with this morning, but she will hope to join us.
Great, thanks, Chair.
Okay, item 1 then is the declaration of interest. I don't think there's anything obvious, Christine, is there?
No, nothing obvious, Chair.
If you have anything to wish to declare, now's the time. Okay, if there's none, going to the business item 2, and that's the update climate change actions and submission of the climate change public sector report for 2001-2022. Katie.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. I'm going to introduce this paper this morning on behalf of Andrew Kennedy. He's away in jury duty. He has the lead role around climate change for the whole organisation. And this morning we're going to bring an update on all of our work around this, which has really developed quite dramatically over the past 3 years. We've got a strategic approach now, we've got funding available, and we're touching on a whole range of different areas. James Lally, because it's quite a thick report, is going to take you through a presentation in this and then give you the opportunity for questions. And there's a number of the leads within the strategy of my heads of service who are in the room as well, who'll be able to answer specific questions. So, Chair, if it's okay with you, I'll pass to James to take us through the presentation.
No problem, Katie. Over to you, James.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Chair. If I could maybe just start by echoing what Katie said, this report, although I'm standing here delivering the presentation, it reflects a multitude of work that's going on across a range of services in the council, and we'll go through some of the progress and the actions as we go through the report. But in particular, I'd like to thank Kenny Nicholson and the energy team for pulling together the stats and the updates in Appendix 2 of the report. So just to give you a summary of what the report is actually before you is trying to achieve. It's trying to give you an update on our performance figures, so the council's carbon footprint for 2020-21-22, and an analysis of our carbon emissions for that year. And it's trying to present that within the context of the wider climate change strategy and the work that's been going on across each of the 4 themes of that strategy. We also touch on the leadership of our children and young people and the difference that they're making to our climate change response, and also the support that we're giving to our communities and businesses and the links between the climate change emergency and the cost of living crisis in terms of energy. Finally, we set out some proposals for engagement, project oversight and governance, and look to the future and reflect in the conclusions of the report. So just turning, before I go into the detailed analysis, as usual with these reports, I think it's worth highlighting some of the health warnings. And there has been a kind of flat line over the last 3 years in terms of our carbon emissions. And that's really been impacted by the fact that we've lived through the pandemic, and that within this reporting year, we're actually reporting on a year that was still impacted by the pandemic. It's also influenced by changes to the reporting guidance and variations in the weighting that can actually have a significant impact on our annual carbon figures as they go up and down as a result of those weightings. Also, I think that with new schools opening up within the year, so our estate actually increased in size within that current year. And there also is a carbon factor applied to home working for the first time in this year's report as well. So all of this makes comparison with previous year's performance really difficult. But I think we can demonstrate really good progress across all of the reported scopes and themes of the strategy. So where are our emissions in 2021-22? And this is our second year that we've been reporting in a COVID year, and it has actually had a real impact. We've been operating our schools with windows open and things like that, so it is really atypical, as I mentioned, in terms of comparison. But our carbon footprint has reduced by 3% in the year compared with the previous year, and this is a reduction of 24% from the baseline year that's been set by the Scottish Government in 2012. But as I'll mention as we go through the report, this is a historical position, and there will be, and there has already been, some significant changes that will see this drop in the future years. Just wanted to highlight in this slide the difference that we're making with scope 1 and 2, which is basically electricity and gas consumption. They are becoming smaller in terms of our overall emissions. But the area that's increasing is scope 3, which is waste, which there have been significant increases in, and significant increases in the weighting factor around landfill. But I just wanted to highlight that shift at this stage in the report. We'll reflect on that at the end in the conclusion as well. In terms of our actual emissions, we've seen gas consumption actually falling by 3.4% in the previous year, which is good news. That's the fossil fuels that we want to stop burning. And when we apply weather and that reflect that it was a colder winter last year, it's actually nearly a 10% drop in real terms on our gas consumption. So that's really good news, and it reflects the modernisation of our estate and the capital investment across our estate. In terms of our electricity consumption, it's actually increased slightly, but the carbon impact of that has decreased because the weighting applied, because the energy the electricity that's been produced has been produced from green energy sources. So that's reflected in the weighting, and it's actually reduced. There is good reason for that, and we're seeing more electric charging. The electric charging points are included, and also we're seeing a shift in our buildings and the new builds from traditional gas and carbon-heavy heating to more electric heating sources. So that kind of explains why our electricity consumption has gone up. But I should highlight, when we reflect back to the pre-COVID year, there's actually been an 11% fall in our electricity consumption. So we are making steady progress across that as well. So looking at the four themes, turning to energy, key achievements. So our energy management systems and automatic readings, and the energy management practices that Kenny and his team instigate across our estate continue to make a difference, and that's reflected in the figures I've just summarised. Street lighting improvement programme, again, that we see that progress being made there, and in the reporting year it's at 70%. It's way up over 80% now. So again, we're seeing that real change in efficiency around our street lighting campaign. We've got the Barony campus is now operational, and that's delivering, we anticipate, an 8% reduction in the council's overall energy consumption. We've also got Netherthird, Nether Robertland and Comores early childhood centres, all utilising net zero emission heating, and that is really making a difference to our energy consumption. In terms of our future plans, we're really at the forefront of this agenda, and East Ayrshire's leading the way with exemplar passive house design of Dunlop Early Childhood Centre, which is now under construction. The Doon campus is going to be a net zero carbon public sector building standards, and it's going to be one of the first buildings to achieve that. And St Sophia's is a really interesting one, because this is actually the big challenge for us now, is like how we retrofit existing buildings and bring them up to a similar standard of our new builds. And it's going to be the first retrofit done to Ayrshire standards, and that will really be an exemplar for the whole of Scotland. Looking even further to the future, our core demonstrator projects are going to help us to shape and influence energy and how we will reduce our energy consumption and look at new technologies and really push the boundaries there. We've also commissioned the Ayrshire Energy Master Plan, which will look at on an Ayrshire-wide basis where the consumption is and how we can meet that consumption in a green and renewable way. We've also got the local heat and energy strategy, energy efficiency strategy, which the Scottish Government has now provided funding for and has to be completed by the end of 2023. And that will again look at the energy consumption across public and private sector across the whole of East Ayrshire. And that will inform our approach and how we actually tackle and decarbonise our, not just the council's estate, but the wider East Ayrshire estate. And linked to all of this, I think it's worth highlighting the behaviour change campaign. The cost of living strategy is really going to hurt us all in terms of the increased costs of energy, but it's also going to focus our minds on how much energy we actually waste and how we can reduce our energy consumption. And I've got Natasha and Steph are really helpful in sharing some links. They've got their new social media account on Twitter. It's it's clean_green East Ayrshire. If you want to follow them on Twitter, I would encourage that. They're much better at storytelling than I am. Turning to transport, transport is there's been some changes to the reporting criteria around transport, and that has influenced the report this year. But we are seeing that steady trend and a reduction in our emissions from 12% to 10%, and that reflects the continuing greening of our fleet. And it's also going to be significantly reduced by the new fuel that we're using to replace diesel, which is hydro-treated vegetable oil. And we shifted to that earlier this year. I'll talk more about that in a minute. So in terms of our achievements, this shift to the hydrogenated vegetable oil will really reduce our CO2 emissions, and we expect that to reduce by 90%. In fact, under the current reporting criteria, it would actually delete all of our diesel emissions from our fleet, because there isn't actually a reporting criteria for this, so we would move to zero. I should highlight just a correction in paragraph 47 of the report. It actually highlighted that the impact of that in this year. It's not in this year's figures. It will be reflected in next year's figures, and we should actually just note that. We've now got 101 electric vehicles in our fleet, and we've recently completed 2 million electric miles, which is a real achievement. In terms of our future plans, we plan to have our car and small vans are on track to be all electric by 2023. Now, that will be subject to review of our capital spend in this year's budget, but we're hoping to achieve that. Cost and load capacity and range remain a challenge for our larger fleets and HGV fleets, and there is really this debate about whether hydrogen or electricity is going to be the winner in this debate. It's almost the Betamax VHS comparison is the way I use it. But the transfer and the use of the HVO fuel, I think, buys us some time to make sure that we are well placed, and that transition is informed by research and experience of others. So ARA will work with services to determine the best solutions based on emerging vehicles, the cost, and within the context of that capital borrowing and affordability review. One issue worth highlighting is the grey fleet miles. As we returned a wee bit to normal in this reporting year, we did see the grey fleet mileage increase. We had hoped to hold that increase at 50% of the pre-COVID levels, reflecting the changes in behaviour and the way we all meet online and don't have to tear about the authority to meetings now. But it has increased a bit more than we'd hoped. So we are recommending that we instigate a little review of that and within the context of the council's electric vehicle pool. I just wanted to highlight the big progress that we've made in active travel. We've got our active travel strategy approved in June. We also have Kilmarnock Infinity Loop, which is going to be a flagship project in Kilmarnock. A consultant's been appointed and detailed designs are being developed and progressed, and that's been managed, project managed by colleagues in ARA. We also are really keen to encourage this behaviour change in our children, and we had included a proposal for Beat the Streets. It was a kind of short impact thing. We thought that we would get much better value by bringing that in-house, and we've now appointed a principal teacher to carry out a similar initiative called Walk to the Moon, where we're hoping that children can actually walk to the moon by changing their behaviour and the way they instead of getting a lift to school, they start walking to school or scooting to school and cycling to school. And some of the ideas are in the Wordle that is in the report. Some of them quite comical responses from our children, but they're really keen for this, and they're really keen to have the infrastructure and that safe environment to get to school, and that's reflected in the investment we plan around safer streets. Turning to waste. Waste now accounts for almost half of the council's carbon emissions. It's almost 50%. The levels of household waste remain high and have increased as during COVID, and just via the behaviour change there as we start to do more at home and go out less. So those factors have really influenced that. There has also been a big increase in the carbon produced this year, and that's primarily driven by that weighting that I referred to earlier. So this year, the weighting and waste associated with waste sent to landfill increased by 2%, and that alone increased the council's carbon emissions by 1,300 tonnes. So a 4% increase in our total amount. So it's worth highlighting that. In terms of what we're doing about waste, the project's delivered. We've got a new waste recycling contract, and this is really going to be a game changer. This is shifting our waste, residual waste from landfill to producing waste to energy. And we reckon that in the current year, about 20 to 30% of our waste sent to landfill will now be disposed of in that way. As we move towards 2025, we're hoping that that'll be 100%, and that will see a massive reduction in the council's carbon footprint. We've got the litter and recycling initiatives going on in our schools, supported by investment in the Climate Change Fund, and we're hoping to reinvigorate and roll that out across all of our schools and all of our estates, supported and linked to the work that's going on around climate change in our schools. We've got the food waste campaign. The first phase of that has now been delivered, and that's a 200% increase in the number of requests for replacement food caddies, and that is now reflecting into an increase in the tonnage of food that we're seeing around food waste. Looking to the future, phase 2 is just about to start. It may well already have started, and what we're hoping to do there is to target those who failed to present their food caddies, and we're looking to sort of instigate that long-term behaviour change. We had set some quite challenging targets for reducing the amount of food waste in our residual bins, and I think these targets were over-ambitious. So we've revised them and made them a bit more reflective of our experience today and that longer-term behaviour change. So we've revised them down from 10% to a 5% reduction over the next 3 years, and I think that's a reasonable thing to do. We were being very ambitious and aspirational when we set those in the strategy in 2021, but we now need to reflect on experience and the significant challenge that we have of changing people's behaviour around that. And to achieve that, that will be supported by investment in our community waste officers. The 3 new officers are currently being recruited, and they will support and actually go out and work with the communities using the data that's fed back from the waste collectors to actually target the communities that we know aren't recycling their food waste. As I said at the start of this slide, we really see the new contract as being game-changing, and that will deliver a staggering 48% reduction in the council's overall carbon footprint, around 16,000 tonnes. So massive difference that will make. Turning to the natural environment, this is one of the areas that actually has a positive impact on our carbon footprint. We've completed green space audits, and these will inform our green infrastructure framework, which has been developed and will be presented early in the new year. We also have the Sense of Place in the Galloway and Southern Ayrshire UNESCO Biosphere, which is supporting local people to identify and celebrate our unique biosphere here in East Ayrshire, and real opportunity around forestry and planting in the North Kyle Master Plan. And that will be supported by our own East Ayrshire Woodlands and the investment that they have in woodland creation and management. We also see interest growing for community growing initiatives, excuse the pun, and we have a potential funding bid being developed around that. And finally, there's a recommendation that within the report, just recognising the importance of biodiversity and the real diverse biodiversity that we have here in East Ayrshire, is that the council sign up to the Edinburgh Agreement in biodiversity. I just wanted to highlight the role of our children and young people, and I thought that merited specific mention. They really have been at the forefront of the council's climate change approach. And last year we had our first Clean Green School Awards in June. It was an amazing event. I know that a lot of you were at the event. We had 18 bronze awards and 1 silver award to On Thank, who were really the exemplar in reaching out and working with communities, not just within their schools. I think this is the third conference, was attended by over 160 pupils, and we now have 34 schools have developed climate change action plans for this year. I think it's up to over 500 climate change actions now, and this will be supported by the Climate Change Education Fund. So real fantastic work going on in our schools, and Natasha and Steph will be highlighting that in their social media. Looking to business and the green recovery, we have implemented a net zero support grant, recognising the challenges that local businesses are facing with their energy bills, and they will receive support and investment through that fund to decarbonise and make savings on their energy bill. We've also entered into a partnership with, or proposed to enter into a partnership with Halo and Net Zero Nation to establish a Net Zero Centre of Excellence, which will support 25 local businesses to be competitive and compliant in the new green energy economy. We've got 3 community wealth building locality officers are now being appointed, and they're working with businesses throughout East Ayrshire with a focus on green growth objectives. And 124 businesses have received support, with 12 applications to Community Wealth Building Grant Fund already approved. Turning to our communities, again, the early work with our communities has really been around climate change and the link with the cost of living crisis. I mentioned earlier, it's a real opportunity for us to focus on how people can reduce their energy consumption, save the planet and save their wallets. So to achieve that, we've got our first green eco cookbook, which will be delivered throughout our communities and through our schools. And that will signpost energy efficiency and low waste and affordable ways to cook. That will be supported by Mark and his team, who are doing some demonstrations in cooking linked to the Warm Spaces campaign that we have and the warm spaces that we're providing. We also have these climate change workshops that we're hoping to deliver within the warm spaces, and we hope to programme that over the winter period, just to highlight how we can actually all make a difference within our own homes. Should highlight that Drongan has been selected and is receiving support as a climate action town, and we're really interested to keep an eye on that. It's a Scottish Government initiative that has been funded by and supported by an external agency, and we want to learn from that and see how we can replicate some of this approach across all of East Ayrshire. And finally, the Scottish Government have given some funding to create an Ayrshire Climate Change Hub. They have appointed 2 new coordinators, and we want to link with them to see how we can maximise, because they are doing very much similar to our Community Climate Investment Fund, and we want to work with them to see how we can maximise and get the biggest bang for our buck with our communities. Finally, in relation to our communities, we're partnering with the Energy Agency and propose to open up EcoFlex 4. This is a scheme that is funded by the energy companies themselves and will provide funding to upgrade some of the most inefficient properties in East Ayrshire. And we want to open up and get access to that to as wide a range as possible. Hope to have that in place by the new year. In terms of project oversight, the Member Officer Working Group on Climate Change will retain that strategic oversight. And what we're doing there is linking elected members and the young people with 12 themes with lead officers. And we really want to get that conversation going and to actually ensure that they are influencing and shaping our future actions. We're also proposing 2 new project oversight groups, one around energy and transport, recognising the significant investment and links around energy there, and the second around waste and the natural environment, which again recognises links between composting and waste and some of the recycling initiatives and how we can link that with the natural environment. It's proposed these groups will meet quarterly and that progress on climate change actions will be reported by exception via East Ayrshire Performs. So just turning to the conclusions, and I suppose this just bringing it all together, we've seen excellent progress that's been made across all of the themes. Not all of this is actually reflected in our historical performance figures for 2020-21. But we now have many of the solutions that allow us to reach the net zero targets. Moving our waste disposal arrangements from landfill to waste for energy will be game changing and will halve our carbon footprint. The initiatives that we've got with the new fuel, again, will reduce our transport emissions. So the focus will shift back to energy and the decarbonisation of our estate. And the small graph at the bottom shows the difference. So at the moment, in the current figures, energy accounts for 43%. And with the new waste contract and the changes in transport, it will rise to 85%. So that really does focus that. And this is recognised by the Scottish Government, it's recognised by COSLA, and I think we need to acknowledge that funding will remain a challenge. We just don't have the capital funds to do that, so we're going to have to work collectively with colleagues in government and in the private sector to look at new funding models and see how we can achieve and deliver our plans to reach net zero for our estate. I would like to recommend to seek approval of the recommendations as outlined in the report. But in the meantime, I'm happy to take any questions and would welcome some discussion on the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, James. That's a great presentation. So much work going on right across the board there, and great to see Natasha and Steph do some of that work there. But I mean, this is part of our business right across everything that we do. And, you know, a lot of this came from our young people, and it's right that we involve our young people in so much of the things that we're doing right out there. I know loads of questions, but can I maybe just kick it off? I was just amazed to hear just how much we're wasting in terms of food, James, and I mean, another big issue is food packaging, and I know that young people have drawn that to our attention. It's what more, I mean, and it was great to see during the week in a visit to the Central Kitchen up that we're producing school dinners and all our other food with zero waste. That was absolutely incredible to see that, and it's just how we take that into, you know, share that practice with people and their own, you know, their own domestic circumstances. So I mean, basically, what more can we do in terms of food, and does that include food packaging?
Thanks, Chair. And I think food waste is a real priority for us. We've recognised that through the investment that we've made in the climate change funding, and through as we now look to go into the second phase of that. The main aim is to try and prevent food waste in the first place. And that, I mean, the messaging from Zero Waste Scotland is that, and this was pre the recent inflationary increases, but the average family could save around £700 a year just by shopping smart. So that's where we really want to encourage them. And then any food that we do waste, because, you know, your peelings and things like that do naturally get wasted and there's unavoidable food waste, we really want to encourage that to be recycled through the food waste caddies. We've done some really nice wee videos that actually highlight what happens to your food waste and how it's turned into energy, and we'll be sharing that through social media and on the council's website. turning to your point about packaging, you're absolutely right. The council has moved to new packaging arrangements that are eco-friendly and really made significant progress there. I think the introduction of the plastics ban, or the single-use plastics ban by the Scottish Government, will also have a significant difference. But it's an argument that I often have. Sometimes the packaging actually saves the food from wasting. It makes it last longer. And it actually benefits, because we would have more food waste if the packaging wasn't in place. Now, I think what's happening nationally is that there are some discussions going on, and there's legislation going through, I think, at Westminster, that will legislate for packaging and will actually, where packaging is damaged and detrimental to the environment, it will introduce a producer pays principle, where they will have to pay for the disposal costs of that. So that, I think, that will really drive innovation around packaging, and we'll see much more use of the green packaging in the future. So it's a kind of twofold. There's a bottom-up approach from the council, and then a top-down approach from the governments and legislating for new ways of working, and new packaging at a national level will help as well.
Thanks, James. I've got Jim, Graham and John McFadden.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the presentation, James. Just a couple of comments and a couple of questions for myself. Firstly, just to congratulate the schools, the 19 schools, and their awards and their achievements towards that target that we're aiming for, and greatly appreciate their assistance in that. The second comment would be the estimates for parity with electric vehicles as opposed to ICE. I think it's a brave estimate to bring the amount to parity by 25, considering the massive differential in price increases now. But I look forward to that. Hopefully help us in our drive towards it, and obviously the wider public as well. But for a couple of questions in paragraph 26 in the table in there, for the 2 schools that are off-grid, how are we going to look at that, and what measures are going to be taken into place to replace the gas oil that they're burning to maybe a more sustainable system for us? And secondly, the thing that we're paragraph 48 is noting about so much the what we can do and what we can do in the reduction of the cost for the larger vehicles, the improvement in the load capacity and range. But what we can do is have a look at the charging with the infrastructure, and how are we going about that, improving that prior to these coming in.
Chair, we do have colleagues in the room that have much more experience and knowledge in this, so I would, particularly in the energy one, pass that on to either Simon Bell or Magnus Dowie in the team, just to answer that one. In relation to transport, Kevin's here and may wish to comment, but we have got capital investment within the capital programme to increase the electric vehicle charging infrastructure for our own estate. And Kevin is working on development of a wider EV charging strategy for the public as well, and he may wish to say more about that as well.
Through you, Chair, in terms of the public EV charging strategy, I've been working with Transport Scotland, Scottish Futures Trust and colleagues in North Ayrshire Council, because I represent South and East, and I will be bringing a paper hopefully to Cabinet in February to detail out our public charging strategy across the 3 years, because it would be a pan-Ayrshire model as a public-private partnership. Thank you, Chair.
Simon?
Thanks, Chair. Apologies, my connection dropped out when Councillor McMahon made his question. Could possibly repeat that? Apologies.
Okay, Simon. So what the question I was asking, I was running about the table in paragraph 26, and it was about the 2 schools that are currently off-grid, that are burning gas oil. What kind of steps are we putting in place to get them into a more sustainable heating system that will forward the drive for us to meet our targets?
Yeah, thanks, through you, Chair. So we're currently kind of reviewing the whole estate through a pilot exercise that we're undertaking just now. We're working in conjunction with Edinburgh Council, Perth and Kinross and Fife to look at a range of different building types across each of our authorities, and just what retrofit and energy solutions are best suited to those within the overall sort of context of the financial climate. So that exercise is ongoing just now. The results are starting to come through, and we'll have a better picture on that at the start of the new year, and that'll start to inform just what these kind of interventions will be. I suppose it's important to say that, you know, a fabric first approach is really what we want to develop for our buildings, because you know, that's going to be fundamental in reducing the energy consumption of whatever heating source goes into them. So that work's ongoing just now right across the state, including the schools.
Maybe I could add something there, which in respect of Sorn and Little Mill, which are burning gas oil at the moment, we are looking at the possibility of using hydrotreated vegetable oil similar to the diesel vehicles, which would give us an interim measure to reduce emissions by sort of 90%. And our fuel supplier thinks with rejetting the boilers, they could burn that fuel. So that's something we're looking at in the interim.
Thanks for that, man. Just a wee add on to that. And is it gas oil we're burning, or is it kerosene that we're burning in the boilers?
It's gas oil at the moment.
Gas oil?
Yes.
So could I ask why we're burning gas oil as opposed to kerosene when it's less, puts out less emissions?
Marginally less emissions with kerosene. To be honest, the difference is less than 1%. So I think it's come down to the most advantageous in cost traditionally through the procurement sort of model. But, you know, I think with HVO, we could maybe take a 90% sort of shift. That would be really worth doing as an interim measure.
Thanks, Magnus. Graham?
Thanks, Chair. I've got the privilege of being the climate change and net zero spokesperson for the council, and I'd like to thank James Lally for this excellent report. I know exactly the amount of time and effort that's been put into it, and having to work with the forever changing waiting system. I know you've been from the midnight oil trying to get that report done. This report reflects last year's figures, but James has highlighted the great work that's been on this year. And this report really demonstrates that East Ayrshire Council are taking the climate emergency seriously. And we continue to progress towards our net zero targets. The new waste disposal and ARA switching the transport fleet to the hydro-treated vegetable oil should see a very large reduction in carbon footprint for the report for 22-23. But I do have to pay tribute to our young people, who really are the driving force behind behavioural change. I had the pleasure attending the Clean Green School Awards and the third Youth Climate Change Conference. The actions our young people are taking through their schools is truly inspiring. And I have to congratulate On Thank Primary on achieving the first ever silver award. The young people in that school are going above and beyond. I hear their new slogan is "Going for Gold." So I wish them all the best in that. I would also like to welcome Stephanie and Natasha to the climate change team. They're the new climate change graduate interns. I know they're already getting stuck in, and I look forward to working with them in the future. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Graham. And I heard, you know, the new group in Drongan, the Climate Action Group, maybe the first time in Drongan, the Green Awards might get celebrated next year. Thanks very much, Graham. I think that's a really important point to make about the young people. We're really okay. John.
Yes. Good morning. Thank you very much for a very interesting report, James, and you know, the great work you're doing. And you know, I'm very supportive of the whole idea of climate initiative and trying to improve things. I have two concerns. The first one is probably my strongest concern. I mean, we're going to improve our figures by creating, you know, the waste pellets, turning the waste into pellets instead of burning it in landfill, burying it in landfill, which I fully understand. You know, landfill just creates methane, so unless you're capturing it, the methane is going into the atmosphere. So you can see the point in that. But what I can't see the point in is creating these pellets and then shipping them somewhere else. because we keep speaking within the council and within the Scottish Government as a whole and the Westminster Government of saving the world. Now, if we create these pellets and then we ship them somewhere else in the world to get burned for energy use, they're being burned within the world because they can't be burned anywhere else. So that is affecting the whole world climate. It may be not affecting us directly here in Scotland, though if we ship it to Europe, the emissions will probably blow back all over our country anyway. But by shipping it abroad, all we're doing is creating a bigger carbon footprint with the pellets, the energy and the cost and the fuel used to ship the pellets somewhere else to get burned. Why, considering we're going to have a long-term, endless amount of rubbish within the country to be dealt with indefinitely, are we not looking to try and burn them here where we need energy, because the energy is something we need? And why aren't we developing very highly filtered burning plants like cars with catalytic converters? Why are we not going down that route? I mean, that'd be far more sensible to turn the waste into energy pellets, use it here, minimize its worldwide carbon footprint, get the benefit from it, and probably burn it under far greater stringent controls here than it may be burned in some other country who doesn't really care how they burn it very inefficiently. Because, I mean, we're not solving a problem, we're just moving a problem. And by moving it, we're just adding to it with its own carbon footprint. And secondly, very quickly, I mean, I'm in the garage business. So I deal with lots of cars and, I've been through this whole rush of people over the years converting vehicles to vegetable oil and reprocessed chip oil and all these different things. And almost all the people I know that ever tried it have now given up, because ultimately, certainly in smaller vehicles, that ends up damaging the engines, the emission systems. It won't pass MOTs. I'm not 100% familiar exactly how it would work with bigger vehicles, but if we are going to use vehicles with this oil, are we going to get an absolute guarantee from the manufacturer, the suppliers of these oils, that it won't cost very expensive repairs down the line on our vehicles if it damages the DPF filters, catalytic converters? And I hope to goodness we're not going to circumvent any of the filtration system, because the emissions from that will be just as bad. So sorry to be negative on those two things, but I really support everything else we do, and I really like the report. But I'd like to know your opinion on those two subjects. Thank you.
Thanks very much, John. I think we'd all concur with you, certainly with your first comment. There's no sense in transporting these things inefficiently across the globe, particularly not doing any good really down in that process. And that's maybe something we should maybe relate back to some of the governments, and some of the other agencies, because I think it's very valid what you're saying. I don't know if James, if you want to comment further, and I'll bring maybe Kevin in the technical points, because maybe the best place about the performance of recyclable fuel oils.
Yep, thanks, Chair. There are a number, and it's quite a detailed issue here. There's a national review of the waste to energy plants, and that's ongoing at the moment. I think there's still some debate about the effectiveness of these and the benefits that they deliver over landfill. But the information that we have at the moment indicates that it does generate a significant carbon saving between going to landfill. And I think Councillor McFadden mentioned the danger of methane, and I think that was recognised at COP26 in Glasgow, and the commitments to reduce methane across the world. So the landfill ban is really directly links with that. But I think there is much more that can be done in terms of how the energy is used from these waste to energy plants, and also just to reflect back on the point that Councillor McFadden made about our existing arrangements going to other countries. that is a temporary solution. It reflects some unique, and Malcolm can maybe talk a wee bit more about this, but it reflects some unique challenges in our waste disposal arrangements and contractual arrangements over the last year. It's not something that we would be planning to do in the longer term. The longer term is to have a much more local solution, and that will be impacted, and it will be informed by the outcome of the national review that I referred to. So hopefully that helps to answer some questions. You're right that we do not want to be creating additional carbon footprint just to save our own, and that is something that we will look at and that we reflect on. But as I say, there are a number of unique contractual arrangements in relation to waste at the moment, and here in East Ayrshire that have informed that approach. Happy to talk in more detail, Councillor McFadden, about that.
I see Malcolm's got his hand up. Malcolm, if you want to come in on that.
Yes, through you, Chair. Just to add to the discussion, the government has commissioned that review, which is just concluded through Dr. Colin Church, and actually the opposite was the concern that actually Scotland was actually producing too much capacity for energy for waste facilities, and there was a danger that we actually prioritised. We had to feed these plants and potentially the focus come away from recycling. So there is a number of plants that's in commission and through the planning process, and the outcome was that there should be a moratorium on any new planning permissions, because the existing plans should deal with capacity, albeit it will may take a few years to come to fruition. So that would again stop the situation of waste being transported overseas. Currently, the contractor we have utilises 2 outlets for waste, one within Scotland and one in Copenhagen, and their preference is to use Scotland, but the capacity in Scotland isn't there yet, but it's coming in the next few years.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Malcolm. Kevin.
Through you, Chair. Councillor McFadden is absolutely correct. With HVO, when it was manufactured earlier on in the process, however, that manufacturing process is vastly improved since it was first introduced into the market. Our own mechanics were a bit sceptical about us transferring over to HVO. However, we've had no difficulties with any of our fleet, small fleet or large fleet. We've been using HVO for the last 2 months, and the vehicles are getting closely monitored, and we've had no issues whatsoever with the fuel system. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Oh, Maureen.
Thanks very much, and thank you, James, for this report. And I know it hasn't been an easy thing for you to do in terms of the breadth of material that you've covered in relation to this report. And the report is rightly trying to give us an update on what our current position is, and also to flag for us, which it does very successfully, in terms of what our plans are for the future. And certainly across this issue, having ongoing plans is something that's absolutely right and appropriate. So thank you for that. And yes, I think it's fair to say that lots of what we have planned going forward in relation to our capital programme and the impacts that those will certainly have a significant impact, and be really interesting to hear the updates and the reports on those, as you've already explained to us in relation to the opening of Barony campus. So, I mean, that's certainly a very good win. I also note within the recommendations that at point 4 in the recommendations, there is the talk about moving from grey fleet to EV carpools. And again, I know and was unfortunately unable to attend, although I had registered, very interested, very excited about community transport in Cumnock, looking at the establishment of a community carpool. And that's certainly something that I strongly support, and see that that's very much the way forward. You know, I'm sitting scandalised again, that my own car is sitting in the driveway, and I'm sure that's the experience of many of us, and an increasing experience. So something really important to move forward with. Again, thank you, James. We've had some conversations with yourself and Katie in terms of timing of gathering of information, and I know that in future years we're going to make every attempt to ensure that this report gets presented to a cabinet to ensure that there's no restrictions to it being held in relation to governance and scrutiny, and that's very helpful. Again, we really did some work, and we invested quite a lot of work, and I think we had a couple of champions in relation to litter, in relation to schools, really as a precursor in relation to what our overall school awards are. Again, I think that the work that was done for that was something that was effective. I think we, need to look at that model, what the learning, what the experience is of that, linking it into the Keep Scotland Beautiful campaign that again reference is made to within the report, and then look at how we can actually take that approach and spill it out into our communities, which I think is very much key. Again, I think that the retrofit programme that we've talked about, both in relation to St Sophia's and the designs of Dunlop and Doon Valley, again, are something that's very positive and certainly very interested. And I know, again, there is some debate within the Scottish Parliament in terms of passive house standards in relation to housing, and I know there's a great deal of debate against that, balancing that up against what the demands and what the costs and what the need for housing is. So this is again not in any way this change that we are talking about making, that we really know that we need to make. It is all not without cost. So again, something very much of now and something of the forefront. Again, I think I'm disappointed that we have decided to take the approach that we're reducing our target in terms of food waste. There's a wee bit of me that thinks, is that a bit of a cop-out? Or how did we actually get to the point that we decided, was the 50% a target that we really needed to achieve in relation to our net zero ambitions? And if we have, could we not have spent some more effort, some more time in actually making sure that some of that work was done? I'm sort of looking at Malcolm's face, and I know that there have been, various discussions about that. And I know we're all very much in the situation, I live in a very small street, but I am 1 out of 5 houses, and I'm the only one that actually puts out any food waste. And I don't think that's because none of my other neighbours actually have no food waste. So I do understand the difficulties that we've had in relation to that, but it's quite a difference to go from 50% to 15%. So again, I think perhaps a bit more about how we would actually get back to 50% is something that would have been helpful. Again, the issue of, we've had some answers in relation to that about getting the landfill reduction target down and the movement of waste. So that's quite helpful. And then my understanding is that we are making real success. Scottish Government have identified Drongan, but I know that there are other towns, mainly New Mills, that are looking forward to doing a feasibility study as to how they actually get themselves into a situation that they as an entire community are carbon zero. And again, I would hope that there's a great deal of officer support going into that to give them the advice on just how you actually go about that and how you structure, and perhaps link in with the lessons learned from Drongan. So thanks very much, and I'll be very interested in any comments on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. James, you want to come in, first of all?
Thanks, Chair. I think Malcolm's probably best placed to answer the question on waste. And I know David and colleagues in Development Services have been providing support to the New Milns community around that, so he may wish to speak on that.
Malcolm.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, food waste recycling is very challenging. I think our experience to date has shown that despite the interventions we've done, and that there has been, we're talking about behavioural change, and this is going to have to be a sustained national. There's been national campaigns, but that needs to be sustained. There needs to be sustained local campaigns. We did see an increase when we did the local campaign, but that unfortunately through time has decreased again. So it needs to be a regular and sustained programme that we need to reflect on. The reduction to 5% is still very, very challenging. It's certainly not a cop-out, but we will be putting efforts in. James mentioned the introduction of additional community waste officers, and again, they're out to advert at the moment. Their task will be focused on engaging food waste and trying to get some of the neighbours. And unfortunately, this is reflected right across the country. This is a national picture. We need to. There is communities have got the plastic message. They haven't got the food message, so it's going to have to be a sustained campaign. But we will be looking at focusing on that going forward.
David.
Thanks, Chair. Just a kind of update on Councillor Mackay's comments about the New Mills project. I mean, we have supported this. We had brought in the University of Strathclyde through to provide a energy master plan report, which they have undertaken to set out the kind of the fundamental opportunities that could arise for New Mills. So that work has been done. There's then been glad to hear that the New Mills Regeneration Association were successful in getting a grant, of which we've match funded that grant. So from that, we are working together to help identify whether the proposals that's within their ambition are indeed feasible for the former Vesuvius site. So yes, we are supporting and will continue to do so. And once we get the outcome of that feasibility report, we'll be able to look at what the impact is for both the New Mills Regeneration Association and also for where we can link into that as well, both from a council and from the university's perspective. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Just like in the item of food waste, we did a couple of videos highlighting what happens to your food waste and why you should recycle it. A lot of people didn't know that your food waste gets shipped to Cumbernauld, and through an anaerobic digestion system, it's converted into green energy. It's created electricity. And when you sit and explain that to people, it's like a no-brainer. We should all be recycling our food waste. We need to get that message out there. So
that's key to it, isn't it? It's just kind of education, getting the message out. Barry, sorry.
Thanks, Chair. I think just on that, I had not a fallout, but a heated discussion with somebody who told me that pre-packaged food couldn't be. We were, East Ayrshire doesn't allow you to recycle that. Well, that's nonsense, absolute nonsense. And sometimes that kind of misinformation is getting out there. And I think, as we know about recycling in general, I think there is a misconception. Even some of the plastics that can't, even I'll be honest myself, didn't realise some of the stuff that we couldn't recycle. And now taking steps to address that. But I think we do need to maybe get that information out there. And again, this kind of misconception that, it's no hygienic, it's, you'll get maggots and you'll get flies, and you're certainly not this time of year, but and if stored properly, then there should be no barrier. And I think we do need to do a bit of work around that, because some of the wild things that come out from folk as to reasons why they don't do it just baffle me. So I think anything we can do to tackle it would be welcome.
Thanks, Barry. No, that's an absolute fair point. Is that Maureen? I get Maureen?
Thanks very much. I think, you know, again, the discussion around this just demonstrates what a complex and what a real culture change issue this is for us as a whole. And it's about how we join up all of these pieces. So again, I think officers that are talking about education is incredibly important. And again, David, I think, you know, highlighting the issues that we're going ahead and doing, and then Scott Gov are coming in and doing something else. It's again, I think the point that I'm making is about how we actually usefully move forward here and don't merely create another industry in terms of moving forward on this. It is about doing that join up and making sure, again, and I think Barry has, you know, very graphically illustrated why it's important that we have some control, really, I suppose, of the information that's actually there, so as that we are able to combat when there is misinformation out there, because getting this right is vitally important to every one of us. Thank you ever so much.
No, thanks. I agree, Maureen. We need an absolute strategic approach, and it is complex. And you know, I just, you know, I wonder sometimes, you know, the COVID, you know, habits have changed. You know, the reliance and carry. You know, I've never seen out at my business as many pizza boxes and carry-out boxes in my life. I mean, the guy that sees them at the receiving end, I mean, Malcolm, where have the kind of changes been in the last 2 or 3 years with people? Have they kind of changed their habits much, or are they kind of reverting back to form?
Yeah, there has been quite a significant change through COVID. Obviously, a lot of the retail areas, hospitality was closed, so all that waste was generated at home, and we've seen it returning to a new level, a higher level, unfortunately. A lot of workplaces have adopted flexible working, so that the commuter villages and towns, for Kilmarnock, for example, they were not seeing the same volume of people going to Glasgow every day. That waste is getting generated in the home, and I think we are seeing the takeaways and etc. The rise in that type of waste, but hopefully it has settled. It's settled at a higher level, unfortunately. But again, we need to work on that, and a lot of these takeaway, everything can be recycled, and if we can eat the food and put the packaging and with the changes that's coming there, it's just behaviour, and unfortunately people tend to take the easy option at times. We need to try and change that behaviour.
Absolutely right, yeah, and I suppose in with Graham's point with the anaerobic digesters, although the food waste is getting kept in East Ayrshire, if we do the business right, you know, we can get generate money, you know, because there's money in waste back to East Ayrshire. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add my congratulations on what is a very comprehensive, informative and interesting report. One question I had is, and it may be beyond the scope of the report, but I wanted to flag it up anyway, and that is what work is East Ayrshire Council doing with our local charities sector and the third sector regarding the climate change strategy? Thank you.
I think we probably have concentrated on communities and through the community engagement, try to engage with the charities and third sectors, and through a lot of them are run in a business basis, and the schemes that we have open to support businesses are open to charities and third sector as well. But we haven't had any specific targeting. I think that's something I'd probably take away and maybe reflect on that and see how we could engage and do more with the charities and third sector. Thanks.
Thanks. Jim?
Thank you. Just picking back up on food waste and education around about food waste, I think a major player for us, I think, is the supermarkets, and they're still the best before dates and use by dates. I think most of us in here will remember the day when we didn't have such a thing when we're packaging as best before dates. And I think there's a culture there, and I think younger people, because I can say that because my son-in-law is one specific pinpoint for me that I can say when he sees a best before date and it passes a day past it, it's out, it's gone. It's creating that food waste, and sometimes it doesn't even take time to remove it for the packaging, separate the packaging. So best before dates is a big misconception that it reaches that date, then it's got to go. Now, totally different understanding, you know, about the use by dates and the type of products, perishable like chicken and stuff like that. But I think it's important that we focus on that education around about best before dates, and maybe even, I know some of the supermarkets are removing the best before dates, but maybe a more national campaign for the rest of the supermarkets to follow suit and be away with the best before dates.
Thanks, John. Drew?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, James, for a detailed report. Really good work there. I'll maybe get a chance to speak to you about the Drungan Climate Action Town. But Chair, you mentioned earlier on there about the East Ayrshire catering facility at the North West. I went myself and seen the other day there. Fantastic. No waste at all coming out of it. But I believe there's one going to be for the south of the area. So I would like to put a bid in for that just now, maybe to build that in Drungan, James. But the Councillor Mackay mentioned there about Newmilns. I was out in my localities as a locality spokesperson with Councillor Sally Cogley there at Newmilns, and I was getting showed round about the Vesuvius and the aspirations there with the new energy park. So I think it'll be really exciting to see what they come up with there as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Drew. No, I was up there myself. You know, the potential up there is absolutely huge in Newmilns, and it's maybe an appropriate place, as one of the colleagues has suggested earlier, to look at that. Okay, I mean, that's been an hour. I mean, but it's been worthwhile. You know, loads in there. Just go to the recommendation on page 3. Can we agree the recommendations? Okay, and we're now going to item. Well, that's the end of the E items. Thanks. Okay, now going to, there's a whole suite of housing papers. We've had the seminars, tremendous interest in them all. But we'll go to item 3 now, and it's the Housing Asset Management Framework Progress Report. Gary Craig. Gary.
Thanks, Chair, and good morning, members and colleagues. As you say, seven housing papers coming today. It's always huge, but this year in particular, I think it's fair to say that it's been incredibly challenging. So really appreciate the work of everybody that's been involved, and particularly colleagues that are here with us in chambers today. As you're aware, the Housing Asset Management Framework Paper, or HAMF as we call it, comes to Cabinet every year, and it has done since 2016. I'm aware that members will have had the opportunity to read the paper, and also through the various briefing sessions, the opportunity to engage around some of the key issues. So I'm going to summarise the paper as follows. The key aims: update Cabinet on the Housing Asset Management Framework activities, to make a number of recommendations to Cabinet around the asset management of our housing stock, and to identify their recommended rent setting position. From paragraphs 3 to 22, the paper highlights the matrix used, the approach, the results and successes. Our framework clearly follows the guidance from the Scottish Housing Regulator's recommended practice on strategic asset management, and it assesses our stock in terms of overall performance from a housing management perspective. It identifies our current stock using a RAG status, and highlighted properties are then considered by a cross-service review team. The red stock is categorised with a number of potential solutions, which may include housing management actions, disposal, investment works, demolition and/or refresh. Paragraph 12 in the paper highlights that we're seeking approval for the Future Homes Project Board to also include the assessment and future viability of adjoining properties to those assessed as red at future annual reviews. So this could potentially be a block of flats where there are a number of red properties within that block, but perhaps due to a long-standing tenancy of a single flat within the block, they wouldn't all be classified as red. And our experience through the board has highlighted that if these adjoining properties could have been included in the discussions, alternative options may have been proposed and may have provided a better value approach in terms of the overall asset management. Paragraph 15 of the report shows the position in terms of the matrix regarding our lettable stock, 85.7% of properties being green. And for comparison, in 2016, when the paper came, 81.8% of the properties were green. 12.6% of the properties now being amber, and again compared that to 2016 when there were 12.8% of properties amber, and currently 1.7% of our properties, or 203, which compared to 2016, it was 5.4% of the stock, which was 680 properties. So all three of the trends going in the right direction. Table 2, which is in paragraph 19, highlights how the remaining red properties within our stock are split across the 3 housing management areas. And the paper also highlights a number of successes. So over the last 6 years, properties that have been identified through HAMF and linked to our SHIP paper have resulted in us buying back 77 properties and suitable alternative accommodation being identified for 429 tenants. Our HAMF paper also supports the strategic acquisition of new or good quality homes, which helps to add value to our own asset base, as well as meeting the particular needs of residents and their families. And to date, 76 properties have been acquired, and all of those have attracted the Scottish Government grant support of £30,000 per property. 149 disposals have been included since the inception of HAMF, with a number being currently processed, and these are all strategically identified as either last in block or through our SHIP paper. Some positive impacts of the framework, so reduction in void rent loss, and again, comparison from 2016-17, we had £1.3 million worth of void rent loss. That figure's now just over £700,000 or 1.51% in 21-22. And in terms of the long-term voids, in 2016-17, we had 154 properties which had been void for 6 months or longer. And by comparison, at the end of 21-22, there were 28. Similarly, a positive rise in our tenancy sustainment from 79.4% in 2016. It's now 86.4% in 2022. Over the past 6 years, we've engaged consistently and continually with tenants and residents through community groups, the East Ayrshire Federation, and of course elected members. And briefings will take place with the Federation within the next month. Turning to ongoing projects, so paragraphs 23 through to 43 provide an update around HAMF projects ongoing that had received previous Cabinet approval. St Cuthbert Street first, Cabinet approved to relocate the tenants, acquire the ex-council owned properties from owners and dispose, and that's now concluded. The properties have been marketed for sale, and I can advise Cabinet today that we have recently received offers which are well above the home value report. Paragraphs 25 to 29 highlight the situation with flats at Witch Road, Dean Street and Orchard Street. And the paper highlights owing to the complexity of the project and the unsuitability of the previously proposed solution. Consultation has recently taken place with local elected members, and a short life member officer working group is proposed to be established to reach a determination on the future of the stock, and a further report would then be remitted to Cabinet. Campbell Street and New Mills, previous approval from Cabinet allowed for council tenants to be rehoused and one property to be bought back. This process has now been completed. Pre-demolition works have been programmed, and we have an indicative completion date for those for March 23. Clinchard Place in Galston from paragraphs 31 through to 33. Previous cabinet approval for demolition was there, but due to the significant rise in costs, when we went back out to the members, again we met with local elected members, and the proposal within the paper is that a short life group will be established to review the options in terms of potentially repurposing and or disposal of the stock. And similarly to Dean Street, the outcome of this work will be remitted back to Cabinet. Bentick Square in Galston at paragraphs 34 to 37. Further discussions and site visits with intrusive surveys identified that by removing the additional 3 terraced properties along with the flatted properties, we would be able to create a larger site footprint, and the technical aspect of the work would be much more straightforward. So the recommendation is to relocate the tenants, carry out the buyback of 1 terraced property, and demolish all flats and the 3 terraced properties with landscaping of the ground on completion. The paper highlights that should the buyback not be successful, then option 2 of removing the flatted properties only would be proposed to be progressed. And finally, East Main Street in Darvel, paragraphs 38 to 43. We had cabinet approval to demolish blocks 81, 83, 85 and 87 East Main Street, along with property at 1 Kirtland Road in Darvel. However, technical issues subsequently identified that block 81 could not be safely demolished without impacting on the adjacent block. So the new proposal for Cabinet today is that we demolished the blocks at 83, 85 and 87 East Main Street along with 1 Kirtland Road, develop a community garden as in the previous proposal, and that block 81 at East Main Street will be the subject of improvement works, with the funding for a potential Pathfinder Net Zero project also being sought. Relocating affected tenants and residents, as in every other previous year, will work really closely with any and all affected tenants and residents and provide a person-centred approach with individual engagement. Paragraphs 46 to 51 of the paper highlight the rent setting and consultation process. And as I set out at the beginning today, it's exceptionally challenging times, striking the correct balance between ensuring the sustainability of our assets, ensuring that we address poorly performing stock, and also working to meet our ambitions in relation to energy efficiency have never been more difficult. Ultimately, our assets underpin the financial viability of the services that we deliver, and the aim of this framework is to deliver investment in a structured and sustainable way, ensuring our assets work in the best possible way for our tenants and for the council. Effective asset management is absolutely fundamental to the successful delivery of our own objectives, and to do this we need to ensure that rents are set appropriately. So there are a number of inflationary pressures which have impacted on the proposals for 23-24, and some of these are as follows. Inflation, which as at last week was over 11%. The pay award, which is unfunded for HRA posts, of around 5%. The impact of external factors such as COVID and Brexit in terms of supply chains, resources, etc., along with interest rate rises impacting on debt charges and increased insurance costs. So all of this in the round means that just to maintain our own position, the shortfall which requires to be funded amounts to £2.783 million, or in percentage terms, that's a rise of 5.83%. So in order to minimise the rent increase and to protect our tenants as much as we possibly can, service efficiencies and savings totalling £875,000 have been identified. This would reduce the shortfall to 4%. As part of the rent strategy for 2023-24, it's therefore proposed to undertake a comprehensive consultation period on the following 2 options, which are set out in paragraph 49. Proposal 1, which is a rent increase of 4%. That's an average of £3.32 per week over 48 weeks, or £3.06 over 52 weeks. This option would, of course, require the identified efficiency savings of £875,000 to be implemented. And proposal 2, can I highlight, please, there's an error in the date at proposal 2 in point 49 within the brackets, which should read 23-24 as opposed to 22-23 as it currently reads. Proposal 2 is a rent increase of 5%, which is an average of £4.15 per week over 48 weeks, or £3.83 over 52 weeks. If this were to be agreed, the additional rental income would be utilised to carry out additional capital investment works in conjunction with our whole house approach to assist with meeting each 2 proposed targets. Should note that currently we have just under 60% of our tenants who are in full receipt of housing benefit or full universal credit, and just under 70% of our tenants who are in receipt of either full or partial housing benefit or universal credit. It's therefore proposed that tenants who would be affected by the rent increases would be offered the opportunity of working with financial inclusion officers and neighbourhood coaches to ensure that income is maximised and access to discretionary housing payment is available wherever possible. The rent consultation with tenants is anticipated to commence from Monday the 12th of December 2022 to Friday the 13th of January 2023, and all tenants will have the opportunity to engage with the consultation. It's worth noting that over the last 5 years, the cumulative rise in rents for East Ayrshire Council has been 7.7%. And looking at our peer group of local authorities, North, South Ayrshire, Falkirk and Dundee, the recent Scottish Housing Regulator thematic report highlighted that their combined average rent rise over the last 5 years equated to 12.7%, compared to our 7.7%, and the highest of that group actually was 14.3%. So in conclusion, the Housing Asset Management Framework has been developed to ensure that East Ayrshire Council's housing stock meets both the present and the future needs of our tenants. Sustainability of tenancies continues to be improved, and that the best use of our resources is made. It puts in place safeguards to ensure that decisions taken in terms of the future of the council housing stock are based on sound evidence, and the framework's compliant with the Scottish Housing Regulator's guidance and supports the objectives set out in our local housing strategy. Chair, the recommendations of the paper are set out in paragraph 2 of the paper, and I would be happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Gary. Just a couple of points I'd like to make for myself. First of all, just a couple of the local issues. You know, I think in the last couple of weeks we've seen, you know, in my own ward, the Dean Street flats. We've seen, you know, the tenants actually moving into the new houses at Witch Road, and absolutely very pleased to be moving into these, and what a transformation we've made of that whole Hill Street, Witch Road corridor, and, you know, up Gillsburn round about there. So really, that's the last. It feels as if it's, you know, about the last piece in the jigsaw in that area. So you know, I would look all 4 local members, you know, as part of this local working party can get some ideas generated as soon as possible, because it is very much the last piece in the jigsaw up there, and I would hope we can work in that. I think I understand the difficulties you've had in Darvel, but I think these proposals in front of us will really complement the work that's been done in the new square in Darvel, which last week we heard in the Scottish Towns Partnership Conference was a runner-up for a national award, and this actually, you know, these proposals will very much complement that and add to the regeneration of the Darvel town centre. I think the proposals in terms of the consultation, and it's going to be a meaningful consultation, you know, and carefully, you know, implications thought carefully, you know, and that explained to the tenants where we can. And I think, you know, the proposals here are very much in line with most other local authorities in Scotland, as far as I hear. It's roughly about the same quantum that other authorities are thinking. But due to, you know, as you say, you know, recently with comparators, where actually, you know, in terms of we've got lower rates than some of our comparators over the last few years. So we'll await the response with interest. But I think you know, it's clearly defined proposals here, and I think we'd want to welcome them and put them to the our tenants. Okay, I'll open up now, Jim.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for that, Gary. Thanks for taking the time to take us through the papers and the process. And just take the opportunity to thank the rest of the officers just now before we come through the rest of the papers as well. Dougie's touched on all of the stuff that I was going to pick up on. I think what I should pick up on is the red stock. I'm delighted to see the drop in that for 2016 for 680 down to 203, and I'm glad to see the interest in St Cuthbert Street in Catrin. Another crucial point for us is tenancy sustainment, and the figures again there for 79 to 86, for 16 to currently. I know the financial restraints that we're working under and implications of them. I think we probably missed something in that when we're explaining, I think, to members in the potential and extension of the temporary rent freeze as well, and the impact that could possibly have on decisions we make going forward as well. But encouraging. I know that Dougie touched on it, the consultation is really going to be meaningful, and taking into the Tenants and Residents Federation, consulting with them as well, I think it is vital. And knowing how high esteem they've been held, sitting at the Scottish Government table at the last an awards presentation in Glasgow recently. So I think we really need to listen, and it's going to be meaningful. But thanks for the presentation on that, Gary.
Thanks, Jim. Barry.
Thanks, Chair. I think, Gary, I hear absolutely some of the pressures you're facing, and there's more of that. I think that theme continues in the other papers. My only concern, I think, slight concern, is in relation to timescales for member officer working group for the particularly Dean Street. I think, well, it's not in my ward. I think it has a significant impact in the north of Kilmarnock, north central Kilmarnock, and I think, you know, we need to not be kicking us in the long grass, and I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but absolutely we need to be coming back with something meaningful. I think tenants will expect it, I mean, particularly when you see what's going on in Hill Street is absolutely fantastic. Our new, it's been an area, I think it's fair to say, where often when in the past, you know, residents were offered a tenancy there, they would perhaps not have wanted to go to Hill Street, but that, I think, is completely not the case now. It's completely changed, and people are really keen to see that. So that's welcome. But I think some timescales around that, so we can get something meaningful back to Cabinet. But I get also you're constrained with the inflationary pressures. That's only going to go one way, I'm afraid.
No, I'm 100% with you in terms of Dean Street, Barry. I'd agree. You know, as I said, you know, we really need to press on, and that's, you know, why I raised it right at the start. Gary.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree, and I think Chair mentioned there that this is the last piece in the jigsaw. I think the way that we've been looking at it is almost a gateway to really transform the area, and the difference is incredible. So the purpose of that group is to make sure that we get the right decision for people and for communities. And I can give you the reassurance that is clearly had to wait for Cabinet. As soon as we are through this process, that is going to be a real priority, and it absolutely won't be kicked into the long grass. It's going to be an immediate priority for us, along with Clinchard, to make sure that we get the right decisions there. Thanks.
Thanks, Gary. Well, Ian.
Just on the same subject, Dougie, obviously I'm looking forward to being part of the working group, and it's not an easy problem to solve, as we heard. There's considerable structural issues in the way the flats were initially built, so it's not going to be an easy one to come up with a solution. But I think, you know, given the commitment that we've heard this morning, I think we will come up with something that improves. As everybody's been saying, this is the last blight in the area, that particularly at the back of the buildings. They really are a detraction to what's going on round about. So I look forward to come up with a solution in the near future.
Do you have still? Maureen.
Thanks very much. And I just say, before I ask a question, I completely agree, and I think there's no people best placed because they have been dealing with this for a very long time than local members in relation to Dean Street and the issues associated with that. So I think setting up that group is definitely the way forward. It has my full support. Gary, thank you very much. I think when we look at this paper, it just evidences to us the enormous amount of work that's going on and the very difficult circumstances that you're working against as well. Very interested in terms of you outlining to us in terms of what our recent rent increase has been against our comparators. I suppose just a question in terms of where we actually sit then in terms of rents across Scotland and any background to that is question one. Question two would be just, I think you have outlined to us that the consultation in relation to the rent consultation is across all of our tenants. So that's all of our 12,000 tenants. And again, I have very helpfully been given an update by you in terms of areas that currently are covered by having tenants, residents associations and working with the Fed. I think as we both know, and I think to share with the wider cabinet, that's actually a very restricted number. Again, not through any lack of effort by the Fed themselves or by TIS officers to actually establish that. That's just a reflection of where we are. So I think at the end of the day, we really need some assurances about how we're looking to reflect how reflective the Fed is about our communities and our tenants in relation to being clear about consultation. And if we see that we have any other opportunities for different ways of consulting, I'd be very interested in hearing about that as well. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Mackay, for your questions. The first point about how do we compare? Yeah, so the paper sets out that our average rental in the paper £75.38 compares with the average rent of all the other local authorities of £77.83. And actually went back after one of the engagement sessions and looked at how it compares against our peer group alone. And out of our four comparators, if you like, the only council who are lower in terms of rent setting are Falkirk, and that's been a constant throughout the years. We are less than the other three comparators. You're absolutely right about making sure that the consultation is meaningful, and we do need to engage with as many people as we possibly can. It hasn't been for a lack of effort over the years, and the Federation have been incredibly good at what they've done, but we do need to get that feedback from the wider community, and we will be doing everything that we possibly can through social media channels and all of the outlets that we have to make sure that we get the maximum engagement back. And I would just like to thank you for your feedback over the briefing sessions and the challenge that's come through that, because that's been really helpful to the team. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Gary, and thanks, Maureen, for that. The other issue just that we left there about the member officer working group, David.
Yep. Chair, I think in relation to that, I think first of all, having previously been involved at some of the HANF discussions, particularly around Dean Street, and without at all indulging in shroud waving, I think it's absolutely recognised by colleagues and indeed by all services involved that there is a need to identify that solution. Equally, in terms of just being upfront and managing expectations from being involved in those earlier discussions, and colleagues know well there are no easy or readily achievable solutions for Dean Street, so it is a hard nut to crack. However, Councillor Douglas is quite right, and Gary's given assurance that efforts will continue apace to crack that nut. But it's not, and I know councillors aren't suggesting otherwise, it's not for the want of effort, but there have been a number of schemes and proposals developed, and then for one reason or another, they're not deliverable. So it is a case of retaining shoulders to the wheel in Dean Street, and pace is recognised as a requirement. Equally, it's a hard one. It's a hard one, but doing nothing isn't an option, as colleagues have said. It was just to say, paras 29 and 33, just to clarify, I think what's intended is clearly an appetite for early and effective engagement with the local members in relation to both Dean Street and Clinchard and Galson. Whilst it uses the language of short life member officer working group, albeit we're not the capitals, it was just to make the point, if we actually constitute these as formal member officer working groups, then by law, not by governance or me, but by law under the 73 Act, council needs to make such appointments. It's just a technicality. So what I'm suggesting is that there's clearly, I think, support in the room at Cabinet that it be the local members be involved, and simply suggest, rather than remitting it up to council for the formality of appointing the local members when there's general agreement to be the local members, that Cabinet simply note today in the recommendations the intention to engage with local members in, as set out in 29 and 33 in each stage. That would allow it to be progressed without technically waiting for council to approve a bit of paper that says, yes, it's the local members. So I'm just trying to avoid bureaucracy or process. And if members are happy, we can simply have Cabinet note the proposal to have the local members engaged in those discussions and consideration of further proposals in each case without necessarily constituting as a member of the working group. The input will be the same, the work will be the same, and the output will be the same. It just avoids the delay of sticking a paper to council on a technicality that would be beyond their control.
No, that's fair enough. I mean, I know in terms of the Dean Street, the local members met on at least a couple of occasions I can remember recently, and that's been quite productive, and, you know, would support that kind of, you know, if that's been the same up the Nirvan Valley model. Blair?
Just through you, Chair. Yeah, thanks for that. It does, paragraph 29, it sets out that the consultation took place with local elected members, and the short life member officer working group is to be established with them to determine their future. So I think that would set that out exactly as David set out. Thank you.
That's fine. Thanks, thanks, Blair. Maureen, back in. Maureen.
Thanks very much. Yes, and just as an aside, I'm very happy with what David's proposing. Simon, sorry, Gary, it was just to go back to you again to say, my understanding is that we've got the second highest council rents in Scotland. Is that accurate, or is that no longer the case?
We've always been in the bottom half that I'm aware of, but Gary.
Yeah, no, that's not the case, Councillor Mackay. Our rents are consistently over the last number of years below the Scottish average.
Okay, that's great.
I can provide you the figures for that.
That's lovely. Thanks very much. And again, Leader, I'm glad to hear from what you have said that clearly all local authorities in Scotland then are very much with an eye to cost of living crisis and what that actually means for our rent paying tenants. And you know, that really is a massive issue going forward, and I know we'll be very mindful of that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, absolutely, Maureen. Yeah, I think that's a case across the board. David?
I was just to help, Chair, through you at para 15, page 102, the position set out there in 21-22, the average rent in East Ayrshire was £75.38 compared to the Scottish average of £77.83. So clearly to be below the average, we couldn't be in the top echelons of levels of rent. And then you have further comparative information in terms of the 5-year increase in East Ayrshire at 7.7, the average being 12.7 elsewhere, and the average rent rise nationally for local authorities being 12.96. So that comparative information's in the paper that Gary's presented there, and clearly we are below the Scottish average, and as you said yourself, remain, I think, in the lower half of rent levels.
Like I said, away back in the day, Kilmarnock and Loudon, when East Ayrshire started, I think we're bottom of the league, the lowest rates in Scotland, but we're a long way for that now. But it's still been, I think we've always been just below the Scottish average. Okay, colleagues, if there's no other comments, can we agree the recommendations? Okay, and next item. Is the HIP, the Housing Investment Programme. It's no the hipster, it's Neil.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. I'll take you through the main points of the report and then can take any questions that you may have. The purpose of this report is to update the previously agreed Housing Investment Programme and to propose a revised Housing Investment Programme for 2023-24 to 2027-28. The recommendations are listed in paragraph 2 of the paper, and it's important to note that is highlighted in paragraph 6. This paper complements and links directly to the Housing Asset Management Framework and the Strategic Housing Investment Plan to ensure that we achieve the best outcomes for our communities. Paragraph 7 shows the compliance with the Scottish Housing Quality Standard at the 31st of March 2022 was 91.12%. This reduced figure was as a result of being unable to carry out EICRs, or electrical safety inspections, to 881 of our 1,067 properties in abeyance. That's a result of the challenges of COVID. The current position is that only 113 of the 881 properties now remain outstanding, and these will be completed by the end of the calendar year. The small number of homes that are not meeting the standard at that point all remain in abeyance or exemption. Paragraph 14 highlights that 99.53% of our properties meet the energy efficiency standard for social housing, or EIS 1, with the remaining 0.47% or 64 homes being held in abeyance. The position with regard to EIS 2 standard, as it was initially proposed, is that less than 4% of our properties would meet this at present. Interim guidance has just been published by the Scottish Government on the 31st of October 2022, and the new standard for EIS 2 is anticipated to be published in 2023. The Scottish Housing Regulator has advised landlords that the 2025 and 2032 EIS milestones are temporarily being put on hold, and that the collection of data on EIS 2 will be paused until after the conclusion of the Government's review. Guidance suggests that landlords should continue to report on EIS 1 targets and should continue with planned investment in energy efficiency measures and to look to decarbonise heating systems. So it's clear that while significant financial challenges will undoubtedly be seen, housing improvement works within the scope of this plan require to consider the challenges set out in EIS 2 wherever possible. This work will include working collaboratively with council partners, external stakeholders to ensure that opportunities are maximised. The Scottish Government's interim EIS 2 guidance does highlight that since measures are likely to be paid from rental income, landlords need to be mindful to ensure that investment to reduce fuel poverty does not lead to rent poverty, which is clearly a difficult balance to strike. The impact of COVID and other external factors is set out in paragraphs 21 to 28. And since lockdown in March 2020, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and the subsequent challenges relating to material supply chains and the procurement of services has had a significant effect on the delivery of the Housing Investment Programme. And this has meant that we've been unable to fully deliver our programme from 2020 through to 2023. Details are set out in Table 1, Paragraph 22, but it's worth mentioning, for example, the external envelope enhancement will only achieve 67% of completions against the planned work in the 3-year period since COVID, and Modern Facilities Programme is now projected only to achieve 50%. It's important to note that the current proposals make no provision to recover the position from the impact of COVID on delivery since March 2020, other than the commitment previously given by Cabinet to deliver 100 additional addresses for modern facilities and services. Significantly increased costs are becoming evident, and recently returned tenders are reflective of the challenges faced, with increased costs being reported for key projects such as the external envelope enhancement, the energy efficient doors and windows, and modern facilities and services. Given the increased costs now being seen as a result of the demand for material, resources, combined with the economic uncertainty and the war in Ukraine and soaring energy prices, it's proposed to utilise the underspend generated through the reduced delivery in previous years to support the delivery of the housing improvement programme, housing investment programme for the period of this plan. The total cost for the period of the plan is estimated at £103.5 million. Paragraphs 34 to 40 look at the Housing to 2040 strategy, which is described as Scotland's first ever long-term national housing strategy. The Scottish Government aims to publish a draft standard in 2023 and, following legislation in 2024-25, phase the introduction from 2025 to 2030. The strategy aims to develop a new housing standard which will cover all homes, whether new or existing, and apply regardless of tenure. This will mean existing homes need to keep pace with new homes and no one should be left behind. The aims and objectives of Housing to 2040 will bring significant challenges for us and for every other local authority around the new standard and decarbonisation. Now to cover our proposed investment programmes. Paragraphs 49 to 56 cover the external envelope enhancement programme, and work to properties in this programme continue to really focus on improving the overall energy efficiency of these homes in conjunction with the renewal of external elements. But it's very much continuing our whole house approach and future-proofing our homes as much as possible. So with 450 addresses identified for inclusion for each year. As part of the development of the whole house approach, Housing Asset Services have been working to develop a Pathfinder project for deep retrofit. The project will be subject to a successful bid to the Scottish Government's Social Housing Net Zero Heat Fund, with a request for funding for 50% of the overall project costs. The project aims to deliver a minimum 60% energy consumption reduction, with all homes being monitored for a period of 3 years after the work. A small number of properties have been identified as part of the Pathfinder project across East Ayrshire to trial 3 different approaches to deep retrofit should funding be provided. The 3 different approaches are a prefabricated whole house solution to energy strong standards, and a whole house retrofit installed to past 2030 specification based on an EnerFit standard, and a renewable heat microgeneration and energy storage retrofit based on London Energy Transformation Initiative principles. And a sum of £42.83 million has been set aside for the period of this plan on a project which is having huge impact in transforming our homes and communities. Paragraphs 57 to 60 relate to our energy efficient windows and doors programme. The members will be aware of the significant challenges we've seen in procuring this particular contract. I'm pleased to report that we have recently awarded the contract to a new partner contractor to deliver 200 addresses each year. This work is in addition to the works required for houses involved in the whole house approach. And a sum of £5.93 million has been identified for the period of the plan. Energy efficient heating is covered in paragraph 61 to 65, which details our commitment to renew energy efficient heating systems in our home. The plan identifies 800 homes to receive new heating installations with a sum of £13.32 million set aside for the 5-year programme. And modern facilities, paragraphs 66 to 70, in order to mitigate some of the impact of the pandemic, Cabinet, as I said earlier, gave significant commitment last year to support efforts to increase the number of homes to receive this work to 600 per year for the period of the plan. Although the 100 additional addresses will be delivered by a partner contractor, the design and supervision of the work will be carried out in-house by Housing Asset Services. This is a key programme delivering great outcomes for our tenants, and there is £33.43 million set aside for the period of the plan. The Electrical installations condition reports, as well as smoke, heat and carbon detection, is covered in paragraphs 71 to 74. And members will be aware that the Scottish Housing Quality Standard now requires full electrical safety to be carried out in homes at 5-year intervals. Also, legislation was introduced to requiring all homes to have smoke, heat and carbon monoxide detection in place to LD2 standard. Whilst Housing Asset Services can evidence compliance with the new legislation, there is a recurring requirement to replace these detectors every 10 years, regardless of the type installed. So a sum of £4.5 million has therefore been set aside to ensure that all of this work can be carried out over the period of the plan. Roofline inspections and condition reports. Paragraphs 75 to 78 outline the proposals for programmed work to roofline and rainwater goods. The roofline, gutters and rainwater goods are aspects of the external fabric of the building which can be considered most susceptible to disrepair. They can often be the root cause of more serious disrepair, such as water ingress, causing further deterioration to the fabric of the building, or a source of penetrating dampness. Disrepair within those elements can also increase the risk of localised water ponding, minor flooding, or to access paths or steps, becoming a more significant risk during the winter period. The excellent work now being delivered through the more consolidated whole house approach within the external envelope programme brings significant improvement to the homes and communities as a whole. But this approach, however, reduces the number of addresses being completed annually since its inception, and the impact of COVID has also significantly impacted on the number of properties benefiting from the external envelope. Therefore, it's proposed to support the delivery of the whole house approach with a planned and programmed approach to cleaning and minor repair works to high-level gutters and rainwater goods. It's anticipated that this programme will mitigate the risk related to disrepair and prolong the life of the components. A sum of £1.75 million from the underspend as a result of the reduced delivery due to COVID-19 has been set aside for the work. The scheme of assistance set out in paragraphs 81 to 87 outlines continued support for owners through the scheme of assistance in relation to improvement programmes, and also the continued aspiration to rationalise our stock through buybacks and disposals. So, in summary, the paper sets out our ambition to continue to invest in a positive programme of work, delivering sound investment to existing homes and bringing real benefits to our tenants and communities, whilst acknowledging the exceptionally challenging position with regards to both future standards and finance. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thanks very much. Quite a comprehensive programme there, and £20 million a year over the next 5 years is huge. And in terms of community wealth building and all the rest of the stuff that we're doing, it's got implications there as well, just for our entire community. And I think one of the things we've seen recently in terms of the whole house approach, and more and more, as we visit, particularly last week, when we visited one of the new build schemes, it's really hard to tell the difference between local authority housing and private rented housing. And that's when we visited houses last week at Gabriel Andrew Place. It was very much so, as Barry pointed out to me at the time, that our spec was actually a wee bit higher than the private sector. So, I mean, if anything, there's a wee worry that some of the private sector is falling behind, and that's where some of the real issues in terms of quality of housing in our communities, there's issues there. But I'm pleased to see paragraphs 81, to 87, that we're trying to deal with that as well. So that's good. But no, I think it's an excellent report, and just maybe open it up now to colleagues if there's any questions or comments.
Morning.
Maureen?
Keep forgetting to put mic on. Thank you very much. And again, I think we note, and we have to just do that in terms of what has been able to be achieved and what has not been able to be achieved against these particularly difficult circumstances that we're in. But also to note that what we're not doing is we're not throwing up our hands in horror, but that we're coming forward with some very interesting plans as to how we move forward. Could I just ask for some complete clarification on terms of the roofline inspection condition reports and the issues in terms of gutter and rainwater goods? Is that something that's going to be done in-house, or is that going to be done externally?
Neil? Yeah.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Mackay. The roofline work the programmed work will be done externally through a contractor partner, but any follow-on work that's identified through the reports that come back will be done in-house.
Thanks very much for that, Neil. And I know that that takes account of new technologies that are being introduced. And again, I'm sure that's something that we'll just keep an eye on as to how that actually develops and see what it is, and whether that's something that going forward we can consider bringing in-house and having our own staff actually do that. Again, I think the idea of whole house, I know how much tenants actually value that approach, and how much that again enhances. We cannot build the absolute number of new houses that we would all dream of doing, but again, I think this is a very good way to value the very substantial stock that we've got and enhance it. So again, positive.
Thanks very much. Yes, Maureen, it's about getting the balance right. Yeah. Anyone else? Barry?
Thanks, Leader. Just to say, I think we've mentioned already this morning about inflationary pressures, and undoubtedly this will have an impact here, and what we're getting for our pound is less than we were getting a year ago, and certainly even less than 2 years ago. I take it that you'll keep us updated as we go along in terms of progress there, because I think it is important for Cabinet and just for members in general to know what bang we're getting for our buck.
Yeah. I think we'll keep everybody informed. I think that'd be useful when we can see Brexit, you know, the implications of that just start to come home. So we'll keep members updated that. Jim?
Thanks, yeah. Barry's right to highlight that problem. It's what we get for our buck, 103 million over the next over the term. But what can we deliver for 103 million due to the uncertainties that we're having to face? And now, talking to the site agent at Barrett's through the week, he was talking about inflationary pressures sometimes and materials up to 60%. So it's going to have a major impact on us. Neil, I think you touched on a point that's vitally important, that fuel poverty doesn't lead to further rent poverty. I think we've got to be careful as we go forward and meeting Murray's targets, that we're doing the right thing, we're putting in the right system, so we're not putting pressures and extra costs on our residents at that time. It's, again, a well-received report for myself. Lots of good stuff in it. The wrapping, I think, the external envelopes that we're doing, that whole house approach, again, I think is vital, so we're not going back and forward to our tenants all the time. There's disruption, we keep it to a minimum, so that's definitely the way forward for me. Just one other thing I was going to pick up on was the targets that's been set out for each two in the 4%. What kind of impact will that have on us in trying to achieve these targets? I know they're coming back again to us, but how significant will that be on us?
Through you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor McMahon. The targets as they were set out, they basically say that we need to achieve band C or B as energy efficient as reasonably practical. So whilst we're only at 4% right now, I'm sure with a bit of work we would be able to demonstrate that some of our housing stock actually achieves that target. But there is no doubt that there will be further challenges and the possibility that the targets might move when the review comes back.
I think one of the difficulties doing the years has been able to measure the savings that we're making to people, and as they're able to save in their fuel bills. But anecdotally, the evidence is really encouraging. So okay, anyone else? Can we agree the recommendations? Okay, and we're on now to the the SHIP, the East Ayrshire Strategic Housing Investment Plan, and Jessica.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Yes, as the leader said, I'll take you through the Strategic Housing Investment Plan report for 2023 to 28. So, by way of background, the purpose of the Strategic Housing Investment Plan 23-28 report is to update Cabinet on the progress of the sites contained in the East Ayrshire Affordable Housing Supply Programme, covering the period 2022-23, the current year, and to approve the content of the draft SHIP for 2023-28 for submission to the Scottish Government. The SHIP is a 5-year rolling plan that sets out the Affordable Housing Supply Programme, with the priorities and outcomes set out in the Council's local housing strategy aligned to these strategic investment priorities. The SHIP also informs Scottish Government investment decisions and the preparation of a strategic local programme agreement that sets out the planned programme across the authority. Since 2010-11, the Council has achieved 499 completions. Paragraphs 8 to 10 of the report note this year's Affordable Housing Supply Programme update, so I'll just take you through that. Completions since last year's Affordable Housing Supply Programme is presented to Cabinet by Council and RSL partners have been achieved at Quarry Now in Auchinleck for 8 flats, which is our small-scale assisted living development, Millishield Road and Hanniston Avenue in Drongan for 14 homes. Turning now to our RSL partners, a conversion by Atrium Homes was achieved for Busby Gardens in Critthouse, and a site at Corrie Mains Farm in Mauchline for 30 homes by Cunningham Housing Association. There are ongoing works and site starts been achieved over the last year at Kilmarnock Road in Mauchline, which is our first net zero assisted living development for the delivery of 17 homes, which includes for the first time 3 assisted living bungalows. Bellevue Gardens in Kilmarnock for the delivery of 18 homes, which was the Council's first net zero housing development. Whole House Road in Kilmarnock for 21 homes, which was an affordable housing policy site delivered in partnership with Barrett. And Witch Road in Kilmarnock, which we've already spoken about this morning, for 43 homes for our older ambulant disabled residents. Turning to our RSL partners, a site start has been achieved at Bridgehouse Hill Road in Kilmarnock for the delivery of 101 homes by Cunningham Housing Association. Another office conversion by Cunningham at Campbellton Drive in Kilmarnock for an identified need. And Irvine Road in Comores for 29 homes by Cunningham Housing Association in partnership with Miller Homes. Paragraphs 25 to 29 of the report note that as a result of national and international factors, cost increases are being reported and experienced across the sector, and these are impacting the affordability and deliverability of housing proposals for all social landlords. Continuing to promote the New Build Affordable Housing Programme at the scale and pace previously approved would be untenable in terms of forecast capital costs, ongoing borrowing impacts, and most importantly, anticipated on-cost to tenants' rents. The proposed Affordable Housing Supply Programme has been modelled to take account of these projections and seeks to respond to the Council's ongoing duty to current tenants, whilst promoting sustainable programme delivery for future customers within the prevailing financial climate. Whilst the recommendation is to therefore rationalise the Council's new build programme, the SHIP 2023-28 has a total potential capacity for delivering up to 689 new, converted and acquired affordable homes across East Ayrshire. The SHIP 2023-28 was submitted to the Scottish Government by the due deadline of the 28th of October 2022, subject to Cabinet approval, and is set out at Appendix 2 to the report. The proposed council sites across the 5-year period for inclusion are: in Year 1, 2023-24, we have Kennedy Drive in Kilmarnock for the delivery of 48 homes. Year 2, in 2024-25, we're proposing to have 2 sites running in tandem at Castle Road, which is the former Crown Hotel in New Cumnock, for 14 homes, which is a proposed assisted living development, as well as Mason Avenue in New Cumnock for 15 homes proposed for older ambulant disabled residents. And in Year 3, 2025-26, Dalgleish Avenue in Cumnock for 55 homes. To conclude, the SHIP 2023-28 anticipates an affordable housing supply programme allocation of £53 million and seeks to deliver 689 new, converted and acquired affordable homes across the authority over the 5-year period. The recommendations are set out at paragraph 2 of the report, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks. Great to see the progress there. Many of some of the new houses are coming out the ground. It's absolutely great to see, and a good programme in front of us. Colleagues, any? Jim?
Thanks, Jason, for that. Again, good report. Clear ambitions again, and again, it'll be determined fiscal pressures, what we're going to deliver for about £53 million over that time. I think we'll go bonus for sale, I think. The restraints that could be put on us with our own control could determine what we achieve in that time. Again, I had the privilege going to Whole House Road, and I was really delighted to see that, and you couldn't differentiate, as what the leader had said, between what was a council house and what was a private loan house. And I must take the opportunity just to thank Mr. and Mrs. McClellan for their kind offer to show us around about the house that day, and I was really impressed with the finishings inside. It got a totally above and beyond what I was expecting, and a really pleasant environment for the family to live in. I really look forward, from myself, a main point of view, looking at that development around about the Castle Road when it eventually comes to us. It's been a long time in coming. I think the flood defences are put on hold for a few years now. I think 2017 originally that was the case for that. However, that's been put on hold. Yeah, delighted to see passing Daly Morphin Road is now kicked off. So delighted to see that. And again, the assisted living development there, and along with the 3 bungalows there. Just one question on that, round about meeting the targets for, I think it's 10%, if you can maybe remind me about wheelchair accessible. We're delivering on them I would hope, and maybe even expand on that a wee bit, and not just meet the target.
Thanks, through you, Chair. Yeah, absolutely, Councillor McMahon. So in terms of what, you're absolutely correct. The target is 10% of all of our new builds has to be wheelchair accessible. So since the wheelchair accessible target was introduced to date, 6% of our stock has been wheelchair accessible. However, 21%, which equates to 33 properties, has been particular needs. So obviously that includes your older ambulant and your assisted living developments. So we are going over and above in East Ayrshire in terms of that target. But moving forward, we'll continue to aspire to ensure that all the 10% in future sites will be wheelchair accessible in relation to the target. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, Graham then Barry. Graham.
Thanks, Leader. One that's close to my heart, Silverwood Primary site was there on Kennedy Drive. My son's attended that school, and it was kind of devastating to see it go, but to hear the news that 48 new homes were built there, it's great news, and I look forward to that getting progress and that getting built.
Thanks. Barry.
Funnily enough, as local member as well, you would expect me to say I'm looking forward to see Silverwood, the rise from the ashes in terms of the new development. What's left on site just now is an eyesore, I think it's fair to say, even though the site has been cleared. I know there's been certainly a bit of antisocial behaviour there as well, and the gates and access been open, so hopefully we can look at that. Like the Leader and Deputy Leader mentioned, Whole House Road, completely 10-year blind. It's the first thing Dougie actually said is, where are our properties, which is great to see. And the space standards are fantastic. And the fact that here, and the first thing that the council have done, and certainly the developer have provided, where there's a sprinkler system ahead of Scottish Government targets, regulations changing in that regard, which is great to see that these homes are going to be fire safe as well. A couple of questions and a couple of comments I think I have in relation to the rest of the paper. At paragraph 18, and we're talking, and absolutely understandable, that we are going to be buying back properties, and I think that's always a good policy. I think, however, some steps are we going to take in relation to promoting that and making sure people are aware, particularly in an economic downturn. That might be something that people will turn to. I would hope not if they're in financial difficulty, but it might well be that if they're not in a position to afford their mortgage anymore, that they may be able to afford a social rent, and that might be something that I think we should be promoting. In that regard, however, it's what we're going to do to make sure that, again, we're getting most bang for our buck in relation to making sure these properties are energy efficient, because in many cases they will fall significantly behind where our own council properties are. In relation to in relation to the sites at table 3, which is the proposed sites that have been deleted, disappointed to see McGregor Drive, Sutherland Drive been removed. Again, that site probably needs a bit of attention. There's been a lot of rubble and stuff left over the legacy of the properties that were there previously, and I think certainly my constituents would want to know what the long-term outcome is for that site, and I think I'd be keen to hear back from officers as to what we're going to do with it. I get it's a very small site, but I think it's important that we make sure we leave a decent legacy there. Obviously, when you look at table 3, and that's a table that shows 298 homes if you count those up in relation to the deletion. So again, I think a stark reality of we are getting less bang for our buck. Great to see the 689 that we are going to be delivering, but just so I'm clear, is that a 43% reduction in total, or we've just reprofiled it so that we are delivering on the other sites more out of that? I think just some detail on that would be helpful, if that's okay. And otherwise, yep, and I know the ambitious report that's there and the programme that's before us, it's going to be tough. And I think important to say, great that the affordable housing sites that have been coming through are being delivered, are being delivered on budget and on target. Because certainly I know obviously the Comores one is not ours, but it'd be good to hear from our partners in that regard as well. But yep, equally, thanks for the report.
Let's maybe bring Blair in for that. Thanks.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Douglas. A range of questions there. I'll try and pick them off. I hope I've managed to scribble them all down, but you know, you can keep me right. In terms of our strategy for buybacks, they're clear. We have a clear acquisition strategy, which is to enhance our ownership of lasting block, where there is perhaps only one owner in a block. And we write out 3 or 4 times a year to all of those owners to say, would you like us to buy back your property? There is a wider scheme that's available for those that may experience financial difficulty with their mortgage. It's a government-led scheme, and it's the mortgage to rent scheme. We are a partner in that, and we will take on board your comments about the promotion of how we could buy back properties in that respect as well. You'll note this year that we have increased our number from 15 to 30, and it sort of reflects what we perceive may happen in the market right about financial difficulties as well. So we're trying to capture that. The 30 isn't a fixed position. It's flexible with the Scottish Government, and we've seen in the past whereby we've achieved our target. We've requested that additional £30,000 more to buy additional properties over and above our target. And so far, they've been really supportive of us doing that, and we'll continue to push at that if we achieve those targets. In terms of energy efficiency, clearly as part of the acquisition strategy, we would consider the energy efficiency of the property. We generally know what we're buying back because it tends to be ex-council stock, not exclusively, but in the vast majority. So Neil and his team are already aware of how they perform and what needs to be done to achieve the Scottish Housing Quality Standards and East 1 standards particularly. So we've got a clear pathway of how we would have achieved that. And we tried to do as much of that when we acquire the property before a new tenant moves in as well. In terms of McGregor Drive, you acknowledged all the challenges with it. Small site, topography, really problematic. At this time, it just wouldn't be, when we're following the public pound, it just would not be a site that would stand up in any way, shape or form. I take on board your comments and we'll remit that to officers to go and look at the condition. Us being a good neighbour has been really fundamental to us repurposing sites. Silverwood Primary, Witch Road, Davidale Avenue. And again, I'll just give you some commitments right about that will ensure we're a good neighbour until these sites actually go on site and are developed, and thereafter as well. And the percentage, I'll need to come back to you on the percentage split. Clearly within the programme, you'll see ordinarily we would have unnamed sites and locations in the authority. Site in Comores, site in Sturton, they're not showing within the SHIP this year. The reason why is we don't have the sites. And second to that is we now have the affordable housing policy, whereby if a site was to be realised that met the conditions of that, we would have our quarter share, much like the celebrated Old House Road. So we will still and would still definitely look to get houses within those key locations that meet our strategic priorities as well.
Thanks. Just to come back on that, no, absolutely. I think it's right. Having unnamed sites in an uncertain market is probably not wise. Let's make sure we are putting our pound where we know we're going to get something from it. As I say, just the total number in table 3 was 298 if you include, and that does include unallocated. Obviously, what we're talking about for our 53 million is 689 homes. I think more the question was around is actually were we looking at something that was much more near the 1,000 mark, and we've been realistic to say we know what the money we're going to get from this, and as a result we're reprofiling to something that's more reasonable in terms of the 689. I think on that, if you can come back to me, that would be great. I think the other question I would have is, and I think more a statement, and I'll declare an interest in that, work for a house builder, but not for a house builder who is currently developing any product in the town or in East Ayrshire, I would add, is that, you know, making approaches to house builders to perhaps buy off the shelf. And I know we've kind of resisted it in the past or looked at it in the past and had maybe a bit of resistance from the house builders, that I think you might find that slightly different going forward. And it's always worth doing that, you know. Thank you.
No, I think that's a fair point. I think we did it with McTarget and Michael back. That's the only one in Landlord's Court, but apart from that, that's a good idea. It's good to get.
Through you, Chair, absolutely. We would really welcome that. It makes a lot of good value for money for our perspective to be able to acquire those homes at market value. So while we haven't been unsuccessful, it certainly hasn't been without the trying, and we'll continue to use it as one of the mechanisms to enhance our stock, subject to affordability. Thanks.
And I think the point about comores in areas where we're, you know, there's a demand there. We need to be, you know, be vigilant for sites in some of these areas.
Sorry, Chair. One more question I should have asked already. At page 129, when we look at the affordability in paragraph 26, and we talk about, and it's welcome certainly, the increase in grant available, although it does not take into account the current costs to future-proof homes and the new standards, etc. And obviously, again, the inflationary pressures that we've talked about significantly today. What representations have the Council made to the Scottish Government in that regard in relation to making sure that grant money does keep a pace with what build costs are out there? Thanks.
Through you, Chair. Yes, East Ayrshire, we have representation on Alacho, which is the Chief Housing Officer Group for Scotland, and we have submitted a whole range and raft of information to the Scottish Government round about potential shortfalls in achieving the standards as set out within new build, and indeed the standards set out within Housing to 2040. So I think we all recognise as a sector, which includes our RSL partners, is that to achieve some of those targets, there will have to be additional monies forthcoming. Thank you.
Thanks. I heard Maureen coughing there. I thought it was who wants to be a millionaire there. But, there's a wee comment. Okay. Barry, do you want to come back in? No. Okay. Okay. Can we go to the recommendations? Can we agree recommendations? Right. Okay. Next one is Chris Martin with the East Ayrshire Local Housing Strategy Annual Update.
Thank you, Chair. The LHS is a 5-year plan and received Cabinet approval in 2019. The document is under constant review and an annual update is brought to members in November each year. The strategy itself is structured around the delivery of an overarching vision and is backed by 4 core outcomes, and a reminder of these is included in the annual update. An important part of the LHS annual review is highlighting the achievements over the last 12 months and the duration of the strategy. The achievements are detailed in the update, but an example of these are as follows. Close partnership working with the Health and Social Care Partnership, not only in the assisted living developments that you've heard about, but also through the adaptations programme, where last year 387 adaptations were carried out. Over £769,000 was invested in properties and supported people to live independently in their own homes. Since 2017-18, the Empty Homes Service has brought back over 100 homes back into use. This year, we provided dementia awareness training to our frontline staff and also elected members working in partnership with Alzheimer's Scotland. And the previous financial year, the Universal Credit Support Team received 679 referrals and generated over £291,000 in financial gain for clients. The LHS update also contains a copy of the action plan with accompanying indicators and timescales. Assessment in relation to the achievement of these actions is done through a traffic light scoring system. This year, 95% of the actions have been achieved or are on target, and only 5% are off target. In comparison to last year, the number of actions achieved and within the green status has increased from 59 to 62. Amber actions have increased from 18 to 20, and red actions reduced from 9 to 4. This shows a positive direction of travel in relation to the actions and over the duration of the strategy. The action plan will continue to be monitored and amended in line with ongoing work streams. We will continue to work towards achieving the strategic vision and report progress to Cabinet on an annual basis. Recommendations are detailed in paragraph 2 of the report. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks. Okay. Bit straightforward. Any questions, Jim?
Just make a comment for myself, Chris. I think we can never underestimate the importance of through working with health and social care to keep folk in their house, and the adaptations I think are vital. Somebody's not going to live in that house all their life. I think, and as to what tenancy sustainment as well, keeping them in that house. So I think it's really important, and we can never underestimate the importance of that. The 291,000 working through the Universal Credit Team and the 679 referrals again. Fantastic figures. Really keen, and I know a few years back I visited Stirling University and about dementia awareness and the stuff that they're doing about that and how we can design houses and the likes of that is really important for us. One thing I think we should all get in as a trauma champion, I think we'll always push that when about that type of stuff is being trauma informed and a lot of that stuff too, just and dementia awareness as well. But thanks very much, Chris, for the paper.
I noticed some of the colour we've added to which road some of the properties there understands for vibrant bits to help people with dementia. Yeah, it's good to see. Okay, anybody else? Maureen.
Thank you very much. And I'll yes, who wants to be a millionaire is a very good comparison. It's just to ask again, actually, in the appendix to the report itself, in terms of the time lag between what our target is and what the Scottish average is, in terms of, are we managing to achieve that against our higher preparation rates for how houses have to be prepared prior to re-let?
Thanks through you, Chair. Is that in relation to the re-let times of our properties?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, a lot of our void properties we've brought back into use have been empty for a long period of time. So by bringing them back into use, although it's a positive step, it skews our figures a wee bit in relation to our re-let times. So on the whole, our re-let times are extremely close to the national average, but because of these long-term empty properties, that skews the figure a wee bit.
And I understand that at one budget we had we were changing our standards in terms of what had to be done prior to houses being available for re-let. Has that had any impact at all, or is that something that we want to continue with?
Well,
through you, Chair. Yes, we had assigned monies within HRA to enhance the void specification that helps with relets, and also includes any adaptations that may be required at that point too. So they all have contributing factors to extending slightly the length of time that we have void properties, but a much improved condition of which is relet. Having worked in another local authority and seen others, our standard is good.
And could I just say, Blair, I think that's really important, and I think that was something that was a really positive move forward, because again, sustaining tenancies really is what we have to be about, and doing as much as we possibly can do at getting things ready prior to people moving in is a much better approach to be taking. So that's certainly something that I'm positive about.
No, thanks very much. I mean, the lettable standard, I think we had to improve it, and that's made some differences. Absolutely. Anyone else? Okay, can we go to the recommendations? Oh, sorry, Barry. That's it.
Right, it's encore now. No, in relation to page 172 in the papers and the empty homes and seeing 106 homes brought back into use is always good since 2017-18. We know that empty properties and derelict houses across all our communities have a blight on our communities. We have properties in East Ayrshire that have been empty for the best part of 40 years. And it's just to see what steps we could take to potentially improving that for the next term, the next couple of years, and if we can maybe through the private sector landlord team get some more information on empty properties on a per ward basis. That would be useful. Thanks.
That'd be helpful. And I've just noticed here that one house at Campbellton Drive, just for arose my curiosity, is that the old Cunningham headquarters or rent office?
It is the old Cunningham.
That is good to see.
It is, yeah, that's been converted through you, Chair, and Councillor Douglas' question. Empty homes, yeah, we've got a really small but strong team in terms of empty homes, which is the successes you referred to. Actually, I think it would be of interest to further enhance this as part of this annual report, as part of our local housing strategy, to give you an indication and flavour of what we do to try and get people to bring their properties back into use.
That's a very good suggestion. That'd be good. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? The forgotten end. Okay. Can we go to recommendations? Great. Thanks. Page 198 now in the Gypsy Traveller Service Provision, and Chris, you can take us through that.
Thank you, Chair. Following last year's update on service provision to Gypsy travellers, there was two outstanding pieces of work. These were the analysis of negotiated stopping pilot and the preparation of a local Gypsy traveller accommodation needs assessment. A Gypsy Traveller Integration and Engagement Officer was appointed in June 2019 in a temporary position due to end on the 31st of March 2022. In line with the extension of the National Improving the Lives of Gypsy Traveller Action Plan and the impact that COVID-19 had on the progression of this work, the position was extended for a period of 12 months. These pieces of work have now been completed and concluded. The temporary staff member currently undertaking the role will be offered redeployment in line with the Council's HR procedures. The management of roadside encampments will be undertaken by area housing teams. Negotiated stopping itself is an alternative to the traditional enforcement-based approach to unauthorised encampments. It involves open dialogue and negotiation between the local authority and Gypsy travellers who pass through the area. The purpose is to enable Gypsy travellers to stay for an agreed period of time while adhering to a code of conduct specified by the local authority. The approach was developed in Leeds and has proved to be a success in that area. East Ayrshire Council agreed to pilot the approach in partnership with COSLA and the Scottish Government and evaluate the effectiveness of this method in managing roadside encampments in East Ayrshire. The national pilot faced numerous setbacks due to the global pandemic and staffing issues within COSLA. However, the Council will still participate in this national evaluation, but in order to update members regarding the progress, an in-house evaluation was carried out. The analysis of current and previous encampment numbers and their geographical locations indicated to us that negotiated stopping in its entirety, and as it is used in Leeds, is not a good fit for East Ayrshire. With the majority of encampments stopping on privately owned ground, the Council is limited in what they can offer in regards to a negotiation. Decisions around evictions are the landowner's responsibility and not the Council's. This therefore removes our ability to negotiate regarding the length of stay. However, elements of the approach, such as close partnership working and provision of water and waste uplift, has undoubtedly improved service provision to Gypsy travellers at roadside encampments, and this will be carried forward. The accommodation needs assessment compiles a number of local and national data sources regarding not only accommodation, but also wider social areas such as health and education. The findings within the needs assessment will be considered alongside other data sources such as the Housing Needs Demand Assessment and the census data 2022 in the development of future strategic documents such as the LHS and the LDP2. The needs assessment itself makes no policy changes or decisions, but rather provides an evidence base to inform future strategic decisions. The recommendations are noted in paragraph 1, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Chris. That's an important report for us. Any questions, comments? Graham?
Thanks, Dougie. I'm just looking for some clarification on what parts of the negotiated stopping is not suitable for East Ayrshire. And basically, what's the difference between negotiated stopping and sorry, are you approach we're going to take?
Through you, Chair. Thank you for the question. The main barrier that we experienced in relation to negotiated stopping as a whole package was land ownership. And it really undermines the way in which we can negotiate. The big negotiating incentive that we have is in enabling the roadside encampment to stay an agreed duration of time. Because it's been predominantly private land that they've stopped, this has removed our ability to do this. On the odd occasion that they have stopped on council ground, they stay for such a short period of time that even when we tried to enter into negotiations, it didn't prove successful. Like the report says, we are taking all the positive elements of the approach, and although we won't call it under the umbrella of negotiated stopping, we would seek in moving forward to still negotiate with Gypsy Travellers, to work in partnership with them, and like I say, to take forward all the positive elements such as water provision, waste uplift. The fact that we're not taking it forward as a whole package has no detrimental effect on service to roadside encampments. And we've done an EQIA for both papers to ensure that they won't be adversely affected.
Thanks, Chris. Anyone else want to come in? No. Okay, we've got recommendations here on page 198. Can we agree? Recommendations. Okay. Get on to item 8 now, and that's rapid rehousing transition plan, and Helen Merriman. Helen.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members and colleagues. The purpose of the report is to provide an annual update on the Council's Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan Year 3 actions in 2021-22, with recommendations noted at paragraph 2 of the report. Background is contained in paragraphs 3 and 4, and members will be aware that a key homelessness and rough sleeping action group recommendation was for a transition by local authorities to a housing first and rapid rehousing approach, and all local authorities were required to develop a 5-year Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan, or RRTP, as one solution to end homelessness in Scotland. Paragraph 5 sets out the funding received from the Scottish Government to implement the RRTP. Paragraphs 6 through to 9 discuss the actions and timescales which all partners have identified to achieve our rapid rehousing vision, linking to key strategic plans. Actions aim to increase focus on early intervention and prevention of homelessness, reduce homeless presentations and applications, ensure a settled housing option is reached as quickly as possible, and reduce any time spent in temporary accommodation. There's focus throughout the RRTP on the prevention of homelessness through support for all vulnerable households with multiple and diverse needs. Paragraphs 10 through to 16 provide an update on the progress made in 2021-22 in tackling homelessness, the promotion of early intervention and prevention work, and continued partnership working. Homelessness prevention activities include our revised property abandonment and eviction procedures and the implementation of the Child Wellbeing Protocol, whereby the named person in education and early years is notified of a family at risk of homelessness. The annual review of the RRTP can be found at Appendix 1 to this report. A lead officer was appointed in March 2022 to collaborate with partners across services and implement the actions within the plan and monitor progress across a range of key performance indicators. The Health and Homelessness Nurse Service continues to provide health and wellbeing advice to those who are homeless or at risk of homelessness and facilitate an enhanced referral pathway for customers with multiple complex needs to a range of services. A health and homelessness staff nurse was recruited in July this year to support this work and has resulted in 178 support referrals being raised. Supports include physical health assessments and observations, low-grade psychological support, anxiety management, motivational interviewing, decider skills, harm reduction advice, overdose awareness, and psychoeducation. Support to register with a local GP and dentist, and transfer and request of prescriptions, and the continued rollout of naloxone training. A new prevention officer in Housing Options provides essential links with third sector services, supporting information sharing, guidance and signposting to enhance recovery, mental health, relationships, digital inclusion through Connecting Scotland, and identifying opportunities for young people. Housing First commenced in East Ayrshire in August 2021 and assists people whose homelessness is made harder by experiences such as trauma, addiction and mental health. The RRTP commits to creating 5 furnished tenancies in each year of the plan, and currently 6 tenancies are being created, with the 7th tenant due to move into their new home. All Housing First tenancies have been sustained and tenants continue to engage with the flexible wraparound support provided. Paragraph 15 discusses the submission of the RRTP funding and activity monitoring report and updated action plan to the Scottish Government by the deadline of the 30th of June this year, with positive feedback received on the 13th of September. Performance in relation to the actions contained within the RRTP is measured using a traffic light scoring system detailed at paragraph 16. Members, you will note the progress made, and further detail is contained within the updated plan at Appendix 2. We face challenges in tackling the social, economic and health impacts caused by the pandemic and the cost of living crisis, namely increasing homeless presentations. An increase of over 10% was noted on the previous year. Demand for temporary accommodation and the rise in households who are leaving the private rented sector. There are no policy or legal implications arising from this report. Should future funding allocated by the Scottish Government not meet the total sum requested to implement the actions identified, then these proposed actions contained within the plan will require to be reviewed and prioritised. There are no risk implications. The RRTP supports the guiding principles of the community plan, and the framework links with the guiding principle of safer communities by making East Ayrshire a safe, secure and attractive place to live, work and visit by promoting vibrant communities. It also links to the key principle of well-being by helping those who are homeless or at risk of homelessness to improve their overall well-being and opportunities. A full equality impact assessment was carried out as part of the development of the RRTP and was refreshed in October this year. There are no HR or net zero implications. Housing services continue to ensure all our statutory homeless obligations are met and that our most vulnerable people in East Ayrshire are able to access temporary accommodation and provided with continued support and assistance. The percentage of lets to our homeless group and level of temporary accommodation continue to be regularly reviewed to ensure they remain appropriate to the needs of homeless households. The housing services continue to transform over the years to meet the changing environment in which we operate and meet the needs of our vulnerable tenants and residents. We aim to have a confident, trauma-informed and responsive workforce proportionate to role through the provision of quality training and development. We recognise that continued partnership working is key to the achievement of the Council's ambitions, with this approach well established locally with all partners in East Ayrshire, sharing a commitment to collaborative service delivery that meets the needs of communities. To conclude, the planned activities within the RRTP draw upon the expertise and common goals of our community partners, and the action plan was updated this year to meet the recommendations of HARSAG and has been produced in accordance with Scottish Government guidance. Recommendations are noted at paragraph 2, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. I know this is one of the last papers, but certainly not one of the least, is that, you know, all the work that we're doing here to support through trauma informed, you know, practices to support some of the most vulnerable folk with wraparound care, to make sure we don't have any or many failed tendencies and the consequences that has for not just ourselves but for those individuals that are in those circumstances. So there's a lot of work going on here, and it's, you know, really the people that are struggling most just now in terms of the cost of living crisis. So it's good to see. Jim.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks again, Helen, for the paper, and thanks for taking the time to go through it previous to Cabinet. I've been remitting me note to mention St Andrew's Court in this one, and the work that's been done around about that, incorporating the wheelchair accessible room as well. And the layout being trauma informed, I was delighted to see that. Not so much notices, and it's made a friendly, a lot friendlier environment when you walk into the sitting area. The kitchen and the gardens and the upgrading the rooms was. It was beyond my expectations when I went in to see it, so I'm delighted with that. I think for us in Runabout, housing first, and I think it works. I mean, it's there. I don't think it works. I know it works when support is put behind a tenant who are really vulnerable, that we can sustain that tenancy for them. So it's vital going forward that we try and sustain that. I had the pleasure of meeting the health and homelessness nurse, and she did a fantastic job in there. In fact, she delivered naloxone training in the chambers just recently, which I attended. So some really good stuff in there about challenges again. We know they're there.
Thanks, Jim. Barry.
Thanks, Dougie. I think we're probably all agreed, I would hope we are, that Housing First certainly is the model you would want to go down, and certainly there is a real need for a further rollout of that. But I hear, of course, that we're waiting on, yet again, additional funding from the Scottish Government. Just a note in the paper, and a note at paragraph 15 in page 244, that we've had some positive feedback, Helen, but can you maybe give us some more details on that? When are we expecting to hear? And what is our fallback position? I think, should we not be successful?
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Chair. Housing First has proved to be very successful to date. We are just 50 months into the rollout, with all tenants sustaining, as the report notes. The feedback we have received through the support provider has been very positive. All tenants value the wraparound support that's been provided to them. Further, within our RRTP, we do seek to carry out a review of all our support services across housing services, and that will include the provision of Housing First support, taking cognizance of possibly any decrease in the funding that we request from the Scottish Government. But moving on, we do anticipate that a lot of the approaches that we've embedded through Housing First can also be rolled out across our wider support services.
Thanks, Barry. Okay, anything else? Just maybe to add to Jim, what Jim's saying about the St Andrew's Court. Just, you know, anyone that hasn't been there to see some of the improvements, I would recommend you go down, and you'll get a good welcome, and a cup of tea, and just you'll see the transformation, and hopefully we'll have the new windows in. And maybe the street a wee bit tighter, but it's not their fault, it's the commercial businesses round about it. So just maybe mark that down just now, but unless there's anything else, can we agree with the recommendations in the report? Right. Okay, thank you. Okay, the final paper is the factoring service, and back to you again, Helen.
Thank you, Chair. This report is the annual update on the factoring service following the 2021 internal audit report, and as per the Cabinet report to members of the 17th of November 2021. In last year's update report, we noted that the factoring service would provide an annual report on the following: service performance, factoring management fees and proposed increases, factoring homeowners maintenance plan fees and proposed increases. The purpose of the report is to review the property factoring management fees and homeowners maintenance plan fees charged by the factoring service, provide assurance that the Council meets its obligations in line with relevant legislation and associated Scottish Government guidance, and provide performance information with regard to the factoring service. The recommendations are set out at paragraph 2 of the report. Paragraphs 3 to 8 provide the background and overview of the factoring service for members. Paragraphs 9 through to 12 provide performance information in relation to the factoring service. You will note that in year 2021-22, the factoring service issued invoices to homeowners for services and common work totalling £1,028,718.15, with just over £111,000 being collected. Ongoing payments are in place, and where required, recovery is being sought by our colleagues within the finance recovery sections. The factoring service has agreed to inspect each factored mixed tenure block annually, and paragraph 10 states that the service carried out 396 inspections, of which 241 were full block inspections. The service also carried out over 1,200 jobs on factored properties during the financial year 2021-22. The Property Factors Scotland Act of 2011 places legal duties on a factor. For example, each year the council must register the properties factored. Every 3 years, the factor must re-register with the Scottish Government. Each financial year, the factor must provide each homeowner with a financial statement showing the transactions carried out that year, and we must provide any new homeowners with a written statement of services, or all homeowners, should there be any substantial changes to the statement. All these duties have been met. With regard to the financial information of the homeowner's maintenance plan, at paragraph 12, again, there has been a small deficit in this service, but this should be considered alongside the reduced level of inquiries received by both council officers and elected members should the maintenance plan not be in place. Paragraphs 13 and 14 set out information on the factoring management fees, which include liaising with contractors and tendering for the best service, producing proposals and obtaining quotes for proposed works, arranging day-to-day repairs, and issuing accounts to owners. It is recognised that the current cost of living crisis is affecting all households. Therefore, we recommend that we should limit the increases in the management fees for 2023-24 in line with any agreed rent increase. This increase would ensure that the cost to provide the service is increased whilst keeping the amount as small as possible to maintain the service. It is recommended, therefore, that the factoring management fee increases to align with any approved increase in council house rents. The factoring service financial information will be included in the next East Ayrshire Performs. Paragraphs 15 to 19 set out the background and financial information of the homeowner's maintenance plan. As you will see from Table 5 at paragraph 17, based on the amount of repairs not charged to homeowners on the maintenance plan in the last financial year, in order to cover any deficit, the council would require to apply a 45.63% increase on this fee. This level of increase would not be prudent, and given the benefit to homeowners on this plan, it would be advisable to keep increases manageable as possible whilst further work is carried out to encourage homeowners to take on this plan. This includes planned targeted communication to all homeowners on the benefits of taking out the plan. As with the aforementioned management fees, it is our recommendation that the homeowner's maintenance plan, as detailed in paragraphs 15 to 19, also increases in line with any agreed council house rent increase. It is therefore recommended that the factoring homeowner's maintenance plan fee increases from £15.23, excluding VAT, to align with any approved increase in council house rents. The Property Factors Scotland Act of 2011 is now included in the council's scheme of delegation. Paragraph 21 discusses the East Ayrshire Federation of Tenants and Residents, and that they continue to work closely with the factoring service to review and develop processes and procedures. Within policy implications, the factoring service supports key work streams. Members will note that the council must adhere to the statutory obligations set down in the Property Factors Scotland Act of 2013 and requires to ensure that it adheres to Scottish Government guidance on the recovery of homeowners' shares. Within financial implications, increasing the management fee and homeowners' maintenance plan fee for 2023-24 and reviewing annually thereafter will ensure that the council can provide the factoring service effectively. Within risk implications, failure to increase the management and service fees would result in the council bearing an increased cost to provide the factoring service to private homeowners. The factoring service supports the guiding principles of the community plan. And the programme links with the guiding principle of safer communities by making East Ayrshire a safe, secure and attractive place to live, work and visit. And it links to the key principle of wellbeing by helping residents to improve their overall wellbeing and by supporting people to live within their own homes and communities. There are no equality, human resources or net zero implications arising from this report. Recommendations are noted at paragraph 2 and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Any comments, Barry?
Thank you, Leader. A couple of points. Paragraph 5 on page 273. In terms of that breakdown, is that something you could potentially give to members on a word-by-word basis? And just so they're aware, it's always helpful, particularly when we get inquiries from constituents. On paragraph 9, in relation to the income and the outstanding amounts for the year, I'm just wondering what steps were taken, being mindful of the economic situation. Yes, absolutely, we need to be recovering these costs. But what are we doing in relation to just being mindful of the current situation? And I think my last question would be, and absolutely agree that at paragraph 18, you know, putting a 45.63% increase is probably unpalatable. I get that in terms of the actual sum, it is relatively small speaking, but we know every penny counts right now for everybody out there. But if we've got 100 owners that are currently on the maintenance plan, you know, we've got 632 that, if you go back to paragraph 5, that are private properties within mixed tenure blocks. What steps are we taking to try and increase the uptake? Because I think that's really important. And equally, I think it's worth stressing, particularly at a time when things are tight for everybody, that surely taking this plan out is beneficial to what could be a big bill. And I think just, again, my final point would be, and Blair and I have spoken about a particular situation that, you know, I've been dealing with in relation to repairs and you know, tenants who are dealing with really unacceptable situations that they've got, is that obviously we want to make sure the repairs are happening, notwithstanding maybe the reluctance or inability for people to pay, that our tenants are still getting the service that they need. Thanks.
No, thanks, Barry. No, it's absolutely legitimate. And I think the first point, you know, we have to deal with that with some degree of sensitivity, given the, you know, the crisis that we're in just now. And I would hope that that's taken into consideration. But in terms of the other items, in terms of factor and service, that I would agree on. But maybe just a comment from Helen.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor, for your questions. To your first question, yes, we can provide ward information and we'll certainly do that. In terms of income recovery, our officers maintain regular communication with our customers, and we would obviously be flexible when entering into repayment plans with people to make it as manageable as possible. So we maintain that regular communication with everybody that we're writing to and in contact with. With regards to uptake, we do wish to do some targeted communication and promotion of the maintenance plan. We're looking to do that through the newsletter, but also through the work that we do with our private sector team and registered landlords, as well as promotion through the council's social media channels as well. Thank you.
It's helpful. Yeah. Okay, no one else want to comment? So just leaves us to go to the recommendations on page 272. Can we agree recommendations? Okay, that's us for today. We made it just before 1 o'clock. Thank you all for your attendance. See you soon. Sounding board. Sounding board. I'll have a wee bit of break before we get sounding board done.
Thanks, Chair.